Hi, loves. Today we are going to be talking about Euphoria and Stranger Things, two very beloved popular shows that had horrendous endings in 2026. The first half will be Euphoria, and the second half will be Stranger Things. This is a compilation video. These videos are so long you'll never have to hear your own thoughts again, but I will leave link down below my main channel as well, where we cover other TV shows behind the scenes and celebrity trials and other pop culture stuff. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the video. When Euphoria premiered on HBO in 2019, no one could foresee how big the show, its cast, and its behind the scenes controversies would become. The show finally wrapped its third season after an over 4-year break between seasons 2 and 3, and while fans and the cast aren't happy with the ending, the bigger story is what happened behind the scenes, especially when it comes to the alleged fallout between the star of the show, Zendaya, and Euphoria's showrunner, director, and sole writer, Sam Levinson. The blowout between Zendaya and Levinson was so extensive that it even resulted in Zendaya turning down Levinson's request to take pictures together at the premiere, as Levinson was trying to calm the countless stories coming out about his behaviour behind the scenes. Not only did Zendaya politely refuse to be pictured with Levinson, but when Levinson requested again, Zendaya turned to her publicist and the two lightly jogged away from him. And audio-only listeners, there is some fantastic footage of this moment. So what exactly happened between Zendaya and Levinson that caused their relationship to fall apart so dramatically? Through seasons 1 and 2, they worked together closely, were complimentary of one another, and were very aligned on their work, the show, and the character of Rue that Zendaya played and was based on Sam Levinson himself. But by season 3, their relationship was in tatters, and Zendaya also wasn't posting about or promoting the show that she once cared so much for. And she also avoided all questions about season 3's storylines, her character, the ending, and Sam Levinson. So that's what we'll be discussing today. What exactly happened on the set of Euphoria between Zendaya and Sam Levinson, along with all the other allegations and controversies that have surfaced about Sam Levinson's behind-the-scenes behavior. So sit back, relax, grab a drink and a snack, and let's dive in to the chaotic, messy, and drama-filled world of Euphoria. Euphoria is one of the most talked about shows of the last decade and features some of the biggest stars that are around today. But if you went back to 2019, just after the first season had aired, and received a massive amount of praise from both audiences and critics, and Zendaya had also won an Emmy for the first season, a lot of the unknown cast like Sydney Sweeney and Jacob Elordi were starting to really take off in their careers. I think fans of the show would be very surprised where the show has ended up today. I think even just telling them that only 16 more episodes would air in 7 years, that alone would be shocking information. The ending in season 3 as a whole did not go down well with fans, and there is a stark difference between the first season and the third and what we now know is the final season of Euphoria when it comes to quality, tone, cinematography, music, story, and pretty much everything else. But another massive difference between the beginning of the show and the end was what was going on behind the scenes. Not only were there issues, drama, and feuds between cast members, but there were massive creative issues between the showrunner, writer, and director, Sam Levinson, and a wide variety of people involved with the show. Some of these problems were very openly stated, like with the British artist Labyrinth. Labyrinth's music was featured heavily in the first season of Euphoria and was crucial to defining the identity of the show, but his music was scaled back in the second season, and then in the same month that the third season was coming out, over 4 years after the second season, only then did HBO confirm that the music would be fully done by Hans Zimmer, who, of course, is one of the greats when it comes to TV and film scores, but he didn't really feel like the right choice to a lot of fans of the show, and they had become so attached to Labyrinth and his music and how it defined the show. And so a lot of people really weren't happy to hear that it was only Hans Zimmer, as originally it was supposed to be both of Labyrinth and Hans Zimmer working on the third season, and Labyrinth seemed very excited to be working with Zimmer. Additionally, not only was Euphoria so defined by Labyrinth's music, but Labyrinth and the star of the show and executive producer Zendaya also worked very, very closely together, and they were very close as well. They worked on music together for the show, and they both had a very strong hand in each other's creative process when it came to the show. And that's why it was so surprising to fans that Labyrinth, who was so woven into the texture of the show, was all of a sudden, a month before it comes out, not going to be involved in the third season. You'll start to see this pattern a lot with HBO and Sam Levinson, that they keep anything and everything hidden until the exact moment that they can't anymore. Another example would be the fact that they marketed season 3 and the season 3 finale as the season 3 finale, the season finale. And then after it aired, they marketed it as the series finale, and oh, the show is ending. You'll also see with these things that they try and keep under wraps or try and keep contained. When the information does come out, they'll then say, oh, it was my idea, like with the season 3 finale being the series finale. Sam Levinson is trying to make it seem like that was fully his decision to end the show when it was very far from it, but we'll get into that in just a second. As I said, originally when it was announced that Hans Zimmer was joining Euphoria, Labyrinth seemed very excited, but a month before the season premiere, Labyrinth posted on his social media that he was done with the industry and fuck Euphoria. He also had a few other comments and also lyrics that were saying similar things, but he never really expanded on what actually happened behind the scenes and why he left the show. He and his team were asked about it and asked to comment on it by several outlets that were reporting on it when he put these things up on social media, but no outlet really received any sort of big explanation as to what was happening. And a few weeks after he had said that he was done with the industry and done with Euphoria, he performed at Coachella, where they were actually also hosting the season 3 premiere of Euphoria, and it was going to air for the first time at the festival. Although Labyrinth did perform some of his music from the previous seasons of Euphoria, he didn't go to the screening of season 3, and then he posted some other bits of information about his departure from Euphoria on his social media, saying things like, people will comfortably lie in this industry and still call themselves honest people. So, no cap, I decided to remove whatever music I had in it. I spoke to HBO, and as far as I know, we're cool. I left because, last truth, when I work with someone, their vision is paramount to me, but I don't let people treat me like shit. Sam Levinson didn't address anything directly or discuss Labyrinth leaving the show, but made some comments that suggested it was his decision for Labyrinth to depart from Euphoria. He said he's an incredible collaborator and someone who really built the foundation of the sound of Euphoria. With the show jumping forward 5 years and the characters out of high school, the pop roots of it have faded away. In general, I was less interested in needle drops and more interested in something that guided us through this world. So we will see this type of thing continue, where it seems like someone leaves the show on bad terms to do with Sam Levinson, and then he comes out and says, "Oh, it was fully my decision, and it's all good. It's all happening the way it's supposed to be happening," when this is a very consistent pattern. And anything that Levinson can't explain or hand wave away by saying things like, "Oh, I actually wanted that to happen," or "That was my decision," he just completely ignores it, like something that Zendaya does in the final season of Euphoria. And it's something that I've only ever seen done once on a show. Maybe it happened 50 years ago, but in recent times, I've only ever seen someone do this once. And it's something that the majority of viewers wouldn't even notice or wouldn't see as a big deal. But it is an enormous, enormous deal, and it speaks so loudly. This single decision by Zendaya that we will discuss in detail, I believe, is all you need to know about Sam Levinson, Zendaya's thoughts on season 3, and how Sam Levinson conducted himself behind the scenes. So we will get into that in just a minute. But first, there's a lot of other behavior by Sam Levinson to discuss before we get to season 3, as there's some actions over season 1 and 2, and honestly, pre season 1, that really lay the foundation of exactly who we see today and why at the season 3 premiere it was one of the most awkward things in the world, why there was no cast taking pictures together, why Sam Levinson and Zendaya, what a mess, and why Zendaya has done no press promotion, nothing to do with the final season, and why the cast seem to be absolutely ecstatic to not be shooting the show anymore. The first thing to know about Euphoria is that Sam Levinson and his team love to talk about how Euphoria is all Sam Levinson, that he doesn't have a traditional writer's room and he writes every episode, that he directs every episode with the exception of 3 in season 1 that were directed by Augustine Frizzle, Jennifer Morrison, who she directed 2 episodes of Yellow Jackets last year, and most people will probably know her from Once Upon a Time and House, but she's been doing a lot of directing the last 10 or so years, and also 1 episode was directed by Pippa Bianco. Sam Levinson also produces the show, and there's actually 16 executive producers throughout the show's 3 seasons. Zendaya became an executive producer after season 1, so there's 2 specials that air between season 1 and 2. And from those specials onward, she was an executive producer. And this is a really big deal for a young actress to become an executive producer after 1 season and on a network that it's their first show on that network too. Sometimes there's a bit of like seniority sort of thing, like on the CW and the WB before that, they used to do that a bit. If there's stars that have been with that network a long time, they'll get seniority with like special guest star and directing and stuff like that. But usually to get an executive producer credit as an actor, you have to at least put in 5 years is normally when it goes into a lot of people's contract that you'll get an EP credit then, or it is something like it's a reboot or a prequel or something like that where you'll get one, like Better Call Saul. Bob Odenkirk, he was in Breaking Bad, he goes to the prequel Better Call Saul. He's an executive producer from the get-go. The L Word, Generation Q, that was a continuation series. And so the 3 main actresses that came from the original, they were executive producers from the jump. And usually the bigger the show, if it's on a big network, you have to put more years into. Like on the CW, you might get an EP credit at season 5 or 6, but you probably wouldn't get one on Grey's Anatomy. I know Ellen Pompeo and Chandra Wilson, they had to put in almost a decade to get first a producer credit or a co-producer credit, then a producer credit, and move up that way. But the reason I'm saying this is because it becomes very, very important for later. If you haven't seen the show, you really don't need to know that much about it because we're talking about the behind the scenes drama and the on-set issues. But I will just briefly go over who the cast are so that everybody knows because they'll all be coming up, of course. There were a lot of cast members who changed through seasons, and some cast members would feature very heavily in one season and then either not return at all or return for a scene or an episode in the other seasons. But the main cast consisted of Zendaya, who played Rue Bennett, Hunter Schafer, who played Jules, Maud Apatow, who played Lexi, Alexa Durney, who played Maddie, Sydney Sweeney, who played Cassie, Jacob Elordi, who played Nate, Angus Cloud, who played Fezco, Nika King, who played Leslie, Barbie Ferreira, who played Kat, Eric Dane, who played Cal, Chloe Cherry, who played Faye, Javen Walton, who played Ashtray, Alana Ulbuck, who played Suze, Storm Reed, who played Rue's sister Gia, and Austin Abrams, who played Ethan. The show's first season aired in the summer of 2019, and Zendaya was absolutely a star already and pretty well known. Of course, she was a Disney Channel kid growing up, and she'd also had her film debut 2 years prior to this with Spider-Man Homecoming, of course, Spider-Man massive franchise, and and she'd also done big movies like The Greatest Showman and lots of other stuff on TV and even little fun things like Wild and Out. The late Eric Dane was one of the other most well known people on the cast, and the vast majority of the rest of the cast were very unknown with limited experience, or some cast members, like the late Angus Cloud, had not even been an actor, didn't even want to be an actor. He was discovered more old school Hollywood style. Eric Dane sadly passed away this year in February at the age of only 53 due to complications from ALS. And Angus Cloud, who was a lot of people's favorite part of the show, sadly passed away at only 25 in July 2023 due to an accidental OD. And this was a huge, huge impact on not only the cast, but fans of the show too. Also, one of the show's main executive producers, who'd been a real driving force of the show and been with the show since the very beginning, Kevin Turin, he passed away from a heart attack at only 44 in 2023. The talent of the cast was a huge part of Euphoria's success, and some of the cast, like Jacob Elordi and Sydney Sweeney, have gone on to be huge stars. And of course, Zendaya is one of the most well known actresses today. And what's even more interesting about Zendaya is not only is she a great actress, as I mentioned, she won not only the Emmy the first season of Euphoria, she won it the second season, was the youngest double back-to-back winner, and she also won a Golden Globe for season 2 too. She's in a ton of movies. This year alone, she has 4 huge movies. She just had the drama come out with Robert Pattinson. Next month, she has Spider-Man with her husband Tom Holland. Then she has the Christopher Nolan The Odyssey, also with Tom Holland and a ton of other celebrities. And it's a Christopher Nolan movie. It's going to be absolutely huge. And then also this year, she has the next Dune movie with Timothée Chalamet coming out, another massive franchise. But there's a lot more to Zendaya than just acting. She's very much seen as an absolute style icon. She works very closely with her stylist, LaRoche. And despite the fact that she's been in a relationship with another very famous person, Tom Holland, who's also a co-star, for many, many years, they keep a lot of their relationship out of the media, which is very commendable. I think both of them have very good teams, but Zendaya has one of the best teams in Hollywood, in my opinion. They are both, Tom and Zendaya, incredibly successful, but Zendaya also has that just cool quality about her that you can't buy or manufacture. She is widely beloved not just by fans and viewers, but also by people in the industry. Even doing something as silly as looking at her Instagram, her comments from other celebrities, it is just a sea of every type of famous person possible that comments on like every single post of hers. She is someone that is beloved seemingly by everyone. And not only is she extremely successful, but she has a reputation as someone who is absolutely professional. She rarely puts a foot wrong, and I think a big factor in both her and Tom Holland's success individually and as a couple is that they don't overexpose themselves in the media. They don't use their relationship as some sort of PR marketing gimmick. And they've even both spoke about how when they go to Zendaya's thing, it's her. It's not about Tom Holland and them together and vice versa. And just the way that they are with each other and how they conduct themselves in public and with the media. And yes, I'm sure a whole lot of it is training and media training and PR, but they both have very good reputations. And all of that is so important to mention because Zendaya is not someone that I would want to be on the wrong side of because she has such a stellar reputation and is so well liked. In my opinion, if Zendaya does have an issue with a project or a person, she will let it be known, but in a classy way, where if you're looking for it, you can see it. But she isn't someone who is going to go on social media and be messy or make little comments in interviews. I mean, she does the incredibly smart thing of, despite having something like 170 million followers on Instagram, she does not follow anyone, not one person. And that is so smart because people can, oh, she's following these people from the cast, but not this person. And oh, she unfollowed that person after they worked on a project 6 months later, but she's still following that person. It's absolutely genius decision. And she's also someone who, she does her interviews, she does her publicity, but there's not all talking about this and that and every million things that when you do that, when you are overexposing yourself in the media and things, like, yeah, she's in a lot of projects, but she's not doing an interview every single day. There's not stage paparazzi pictures of her every other day of the week. And so there aren't ways that people can interpret her comments wrongly. There isn't so much information that you're going to offend everyone because you're saying so much that there's bound to be something that someone doesn't like. And it is just, I cannot tell you how incredible I think her team and her PR and the way that she and Tom Holland conduct themselves. Honestly, I think that they are two of the best. And Zendaya, just, she's doing it better than the vast majority of people. There's a lot of celebrities who could learn a lot from her and her team. And I say all of that because I think it just makes it an even bigger thing when there is someone that Zendaya allegedly has quite a lot of issues with, and that is Sam Levinson. And because of all the things I've just mentioned, I mean, there's clearly only going to be one winner when it comes to going up against Zendaya. When it comes to Sam Levinson, he's always had a bad reputation behind the scenes, but during season one, it of course wasn't as well known, especially because a lot of the cast were either unknown or very, very new to acting, some completely new. But by season two, not only had things gotten worse on set that was being reported in the industry and behind the scenes and in the usual sort of gossip rumor mill, but it also had gone into the mainstream and was even being reported places like Variety, Deadline, and The Hollywood Reporter. Outlet after outlet was reporting that some of the actors were saying working on the show was like being in prison. And Jacob Elordi even said those exact words. But a lot of the comments about how bad it was on the set or Sam Levinson's behavior, a lot of the times that will be walked back. I'm assuming Jacob Elordi or whomever made the comment got a very angry phone call or even possibly a meeting, depending on how bad the comment was, from HBO or one of the higher ups, because that is just not something that they want their actors saying, especially when the show is still being produced. Just before we get deeper into all of the behind the scenes, there's two things that I want to mention that happened pre-Euphoria that I do think plays into the character of Sam Levinson, and it isn't really that talked about. So a lot of people might know it, but some people probably don't know it. And I do think it really factors in, especially when Sam Levinson is always talking so much about how Euphoria is all him and he doesn't have a writer's room and he does absolutely everything, like we discussed a few minutes ago. Euphoria is actually based on an Israeli series of the same name, and the original show only ran for one limited season and it ran 2012 to 2013. It was based on the real life death of a teen outside of a nightclub. People will know Sam Levinson is a Nepo baby. His dad is Barry Levinson, and he started appearing in his father's movies as a kid. And he had very, very little experience when he was given this adaptation of Euphoria to make for HBO. There are a lot of differences between the original series and the HBO version, and Sam has said that he used a lot of his own experiences and struggles with substance use in the writing of the show, although both shows did end the same way. And if you don't want any spoilers about the end, jump forward 30 seconds. I am just going to talk for just 1 second in case anyone is like cleaning their house and they're like running to push 3, flash forward 10 seconds. So I think that's enough time to jump forward. Those series do end with the death of the main character, and in the case of the HBO series, it's the death of Zendaya's character, Rue. We will, of course, talk about season 3, Rue's ending, and all of that, because I think it's pretty clear by Zendaya's actions how she feels about the ending of the show and Rue's ending, and it's particularly sad given how much she seemed to love the character and how enthusiastic she was about the show when the series began. There's obviously not too much to say about the fact it was an adaptation, but the second thing I wanted to mention is the much more controversial thing and something that really doesn't get a lot of attention. And that's the fact that there was a woman called Petra Collins who came forward several years ago to say not only had she created the entire look, feel, cinematography, direction, and vibe of Euphoria that was based on her work, but that she was actually supposed to be the original director and worked on the show for 5 months before she was let go slash not fully hired by HBO for being apparently too young. I think if you look at Petra Collins' work, especially her photography, it's pretty undeniable that there was, at best, heavy inspiration from her work, and at worst, outright lifting of her work. Being too young sounds like such a flimsy excuse and just like a fake excuse. And when she exited, she had assumed that HBO and Sam Levinson would not use her work from years and years, and also the work that she'd done over the last 5 months, and all of the other things that she'd contributed in building the direction and vibe of the show. And it's actually even worse because it wasn't like she was just plucked from obscurity, worked on it for 5 months. They saw her previous work while she was doing this work and then thought, oh, yeah, this is great. Like, let's go with this. But Sam Levinson, the reason that she was taken for 5 months is because he actually contacted her and said, I have written a show based on your work, based on your photography. So Petra moved to LA and was building her life over 5-6 months. She was working on the show this entire time with Sam. He then, a couple of months in, asked her to direct the show. She's loving it, she's excited, she's telling everyone, and is super excited that she's going to get this opportunity to direct. And then HBO allegedly magically said, oh, we aren't moving forward and you're too young. She, of course, was devastated, and she'd moved her whole life to LA to work on the show, had lost half a year for nothing, but she thinks, at least I've got some experience, and that they're going to have someone else come in, rebuild the vibe, and, I have to cut my losses. She just keeps trucking along, and then 1 year later, she walks out of her apartment and she sees a massive billboard for Euphoria season 1 with the image that everybody who knows about the show is picturing. The like purpley image with Zendaya's face on like a third of it, and it's like shot a little bit from above with the lighting and like the glitter tier. Everybody who knows about the show, like, that's usually the first thing you think of. And if you compare Petra's very famous pictures from 2015 to this picture, I mean, you can't really argue that there is just very strong comparisons, to say the least. And audio only listeners, I am showing like other images of Petra's that are very, very, very similar to the Euphoria season 1 and 2. And I do also think it's interesting that one of the big criticisms of season 3 is that the vibe and the feel of the show is so different. And most people put it down to the difference in the cinematography and the way that everything was used, even like lighting and colors, and also the music, because Labyrinth wasn't there and they weren't using, to put it lightly, the inspiration of Petra Collins anymore. Petra Collins, by this stage in 2019, when they're doing Euphoria season 1, It's not like she's some obscure person, too. She was very well known in the photography world. A lot of outlets were praising her for redefining the female gaze and redefining how young women were shot in the 2010s. Petra said that the worst part of all of this, there was two things that just, she said, made it so difficult because one, people knew her style, especially people that she worked with and in the industry, and they would constantly say to her, wow, that show looks exactly like your pictures. And then she also had to completely change her style because then people were saying, oh, you're just ripping off Euphoria. And then everyone was using this style and doing this sort of photography and the way that she shoots. And so she had to change everything about this work that she had spent years curating and building on. In the first article that Petra did to really speak about this, one of the big quotes on the multiple page spread said that a woman built a visual language specifically to protect and honor young women, and a man took it, stripped it of its intention, and got the credit. Anyone who knows about Sam Levinson's other HBO show, The Idol, might be thinking to themselves, wow, that taking this woman's work, stripping it, and changing it completely and getting the credit for it, that sounds very similar to what happened to the original director of The Idol, Amy Seimetz. And what happened to Amy with The Idol is just as bad as what happened to Petra. It was a very similar situation, and we will talk a little bit about that because there were a lot of issues from The Idol that caused problems between Sam Levinson and Zendaya, allegedly. The first season of Euphoria, the vast majority of the criticism was around the explicit content and the extreme amount of nudity, especially considering the characters on the show were teens. Of course, the actors are the vast majority in their 20s, but a lot of people were discussing, is the nudity in this show and the explicitness of it, is it part of the story and the narrative, and is it necessary, or is it just there as a shock factor? Of course, HBO shows and Showtime shows, that's one of the things that they're known for because they can have nudity, they can swear a lot more, they can do things that you can't do on ABC or NBC, but there's building it in as part of a story, and then there's just doing it so that you can say things like, oh, there was 30 penises in this one scene. The show centers around Zendaya's character Rue, who is in high school, and when we meet her in the beginning of the show, she's just got out of rehab for a substance use disorder that began when she started taking her father's opiate prescription, and that was due to her father having a cancer diagnosis. Her father has passed away when the show begins, and when she's come out of rehab, she returns home to her mother and her sister and doesn't have any intention of staying sober. She ends up meeting Jules, a new student at her school, played by Hunter Schafer. And prior to Euphoria, Hunter was someone else who didn't have acting experience but was a very well-known famous model. Rue is a lesbian in the show, and Hunter is a trans woman, and they begin a very complicated relationship throughout the show's run. For the most part, most shows in the first season don't get too crazy with the issues behind the scenes. Everything is new, everything is usually exciting, no one's got too much on each other's nerves, no one's been too much of a diva. And a show like this, where the vast majority of the cast are new to acting or completely unknown or were looking for their big break, you wouldn't expect things to get too nuts in the first season. Of course, it does happen, but the first season, especially on a shorter show that's 8 episodes, it's not gonna get too extreme. But given how a lot of people conduct themselves and you're spending so much time together, season one on a show can lay the foundation of just issues that get built on throughout the rest of the show's run. With Euphoria, things didn't really, as far as we know anyway, get too extreme until season two, and season three off the charts. And Euphoria became one of those rare shows where the behind the scenes issues were so huge that it spilled into even the mainstream and was very, very openly discussed and frequently discussed, which doesn't always happen. There's a lot of shows, I mean, most shows probably. I could definitely make a video about the issues behind the scenes, but I'm not going to make them where there's the usual sort of workplace things and the usual sort of Hollywood things. For the shows with the extreme issues, see my previous work and see my upcoming work. But I think that you have these shows, like the shows that I cover, where the issues behind the scenes almost become bigger than the actual show itself. If you look online about people discussing the show, I would say maybe right now, where Euphoria's just had its finale and stuff, there might be a little bit more discussion about the actual show, but especially because the third season was so controversial, there was such a time gap between all of the seasons, but especially between season 2 and 3, and because the finale was not well liked at all. The discussions about the behind the scenes are, if not equal, I would say close to overtaking the discussion on the actual show. As I mentioned, the biggest discussions and critiques for season 1 was definitely the excessive nudity and kind of the shock factor of some of it. But the criticisms did massively increase with each season. And with the nudity and discussion around that, it got exemplified each season too. And many people then thought, oh, you're just trying to make this more graphic and more unnecessary because people have been discussing it. And it wasn't being done for storyline reasons or artistic reasons. And the criticism around Sam Levinson for doing this sort of thing is not just for Euphoria, it follows him through all of his work, especially on the other show that he did for HBO that I mentioned, The Idol. There have been many actors from Euphoria who've spoken about asking to have nude scenes removed, and even people like Minka Kelly has said that on her very first day, she was supposed to have a scene where her coat falls off and she stood there completely naked, and she even said this just seems so unnecessary, and she ended up being able to talk Sam around on that. But there's so many other situations that people have pointed to where it seems totally unnecessary. And Euphoria in the later seasons, where there wasn't the great storylines, people became so disillusioned with the show because that is all that was happening, was just these very graphic scenes that people weren't connecting to the same way that they did in season 1, where they were willing to overlook maybe some of the excessiveness of the show because it was good and they were enjoying it. Season 1 ended in August 2019, and we all know what happened in early 2020. So, of course, there were some delays, but they do manage to put out 2 standalone specials that air in December 2020 and January 2021. Season 2 comes out in January 2022, which 2.5 years between seasons that are 8 episodes long. That is long, but with the pandemic, maybe you can give them a little bit of grace and just say it was a little bit longer. There are so many issues behind the scenes of Euphoria season 2, mainly tied to Sam Levinson, his behavior, and how he runs his set, that it does spill into the mainstream and is discussed a lot of different places, not just in forums and places like that. It goes into even places like the LA Times, the New York Times, and they start doing a lot of stories about it. The biggest by far issues reported from the set are the problems with Sam Levinson, and a lot of the issues seem to start from Sam Levinson's lack of professionalism and how he conducted himself both professionally and personally. It was reported that there were lots of delays due to his insistence on not having a traditional writer's room and doing everything himself. He would also show up to set as the writer, producer, director, and showrunner and not even have a shot list for the day, which is insane. Of course, depending on the director, some directors, there's going to be a little bit of flexibility. Some directors, especially on a show that runs for a long time, they'll throw in an extra shot where actors can improvise and things. But directors, the vast majority of the time, are working off a storyboard and a shot list. And things like shot lists are absolutely crucial so that one, you get everything you need, two, that you are able to run a pretty tight ship and everything is happening within the reasonable amount of time. There were so many reports from many of the actors that their days would run extremely long and that they constantly, if not always, ran over on the days that they were shooting because there just was no organization whatsoever. And I also mentioned some of the actors would say it was like being in prison. And of course, shooting shows, it is a really long day. I think that that's another thing. I've spoken before about some things that I don't think come across so well in like adapting what it is like to be on a film set, what it is like to film a TV show. And the days are really, really long. But if the actors are complaining about that, I can't imagine what it was like for the crew because they are usually showing up an hour before the first actors and they're usually there an hour after the last actors go home at a minimum. And it wasn't just timing and schedules and things that are affected by this winging it method. It's also not knowing what you need or what you want shot wise, which, of course, because say you're shooting, oh, we're having a conversation and G's here next to me. Okay, if you have a shot list, you would say, oh, we're going to shoot the conversation this way so that the camera can get both of us in and G in, and then we're going to shoot it this way so that we're going to get all of your reactions, shoot it this way, get my reaction. We'll have a camera on G so that if very occasionally she will look down the lens like she's on The Office. And if you know all of these things and you have, this is how we're going to do this is how we're going to get it, set up this way, set up that way. If it's the whims of one person and they have to come in and explain all of that and set up, oh, we need the camera that will be good for the cat and it's got to be this way and that and blah, 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 blah. That all of that time that I've spent explaining that, if you had a shot list, everyone would just know and they would know, okay, we need to move to this, we need to move to that. Some of the actors have spoken about doing very emotional scenes, very graphic scenes 14, 15, 16 times, which, yes, you are always going to repeat scenes. And when you're having to do, like I just said, shoot this one way, shoot this way, but you can have stand-ins and stuff like that. You're shooting to me, this side can be a stand-in. But if anything, and of course this differs by like production to production, if anything, scenes that are very emotional, very graphic, they do certain things to try and make it as easy on the actors as possible. They will do things like have a closed set for especially graphic scenes, but a lot of emotional scenes too, because it takes a lot out of people. And it is a big thing to do that in front of people, and you're having to go to somewhere to get the performance you want. And so a graphic scene, an emotional scene, they're going to have a closed set and only have the people that are absolutely necessary, which they might not know if they don't know that what's going on. And also those scenes, usually they'll try and not have so many takes unless it is really necessary. And of course, I can't speak in absolutes, it can change drastically, but 15, 16 times for any scene is excessive. But for scenes in those categories, it's a lot. For example, there's been a lot of discussion about the final season of Stranger Things. I mean, there's been so much discussion about that. Don't get me fucking started on that. I did a Patreon episode on it. But the penultimate episode, they had a scene that was approximately 27 hours long where Noah Schnapp's character comes out and Will, his character, and it's a scene with 50 people in it. I'm obviously exaggerating for anyone who hasn't seen the show. And because there's so many people, they have to do so many shots on people. And it's a hard to do any scene like that where you have all the main characters and you're wanting to go into seeing how all of them are reacting and things. And I've seen things on social media and sort of convention panels where Noah Schnapp and David Harbour and a lot of the cast are talking about how they were filming this scene until like 3 a.m. and then they still had to go in and do pickups. And I think they were filming it for something like 16, 17 hours. And Noah Schnapp was talking about how difficult it was to have that very highly charged emotional scene for hours and like nearly a whole day. And there was one clip I saw very recently where David Harbour is like sitting next to him. They're at like a convention, and David Harbour is just like shaking his head, like that face that you make when you're like, fuck's sake, like, because it was so unnecessary and over the top. And so, knowing Euphoria as well, it must have been so difficult. I can't imagine shooting the scenes that they were not off a shot list, and again, just on the whims of a showrunner who most people are not having the greatest time with, and there are a lot of tensions between him and the cast, which we will discuss more about now. That sort of environment is going to suck for any actor, but especially one, extremely professional actors like Zendaya, and two, new actors, some of whom had never been on a set before. They're going to need a very structured environment. They're going to need to know what they're doing. They're going to need extra education on find your mark, find your light, blah, 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 all of these things. And you're not going to get that by this randomness. There were also reportedly constant rewrites, which just makes everything run even longer and 10 times harder. In March 2022, there were even reports from background actors and extras about there being issues for them. They were having extremely long days, didn't have anywhere that they were being held or like to sit, and they weren't being given proper meal breaks. And I would also suspect this is due to the extremely long days and the winging it method. On a set, you have someone called a first assistant director, and in the sources, I'll leave the link to the IMDb of Jill Maxey, who is a great first assistant director. She's worked on the L Word Generation Q, that's how I know her, American Horror Story, Super Pumped, which is like that Uber series that Joseph Gordon-Levitt did, The Summer I Turned Pretty, and The Dropout, and a gazillion other things. And I'll also leave in the sources a link to an interview that I did a long time ago on my original channel with Jill. But the first assistant director is so important. They are the director's right-hand person, basically. They also create the shooting schedule and are the operations manager of the set. And among all the other things they're responsible for, they're also responsible for the background actors, extras. Usually you'll have at least two first assistant directors on a show like this, a season of a show that's 8 episodes on HBO or Showtime. And usually they'll split the episodes half and half. It doesn't always work this way, but on Generation Q, one first AD would do the odd numbers and the other would do the even numbers. Occasionally they would like have to flip around a bit, because I think it was on season 3 of Gen Q that Jill actually had the penultimate episode and the final episode, because the other AD had the 6th episode, which was a musical, and there was a lot more going on there, so there was a little bit of moving around. But usually on these 8 episode seasons, that's pretty standard to have two. And I'm going to use the L Word Generation Q as an example for many reasons. One, it's the show that I know the absolute most about, too much about, I've said before. And it was also the most recent TV set that I was on. Stay to the end of the video to hear about my recent Channing Tatum, Brad Pitt, Keanu Reeves situation. But also Generation Q, the L Word Generation Q, is a very similar show to Euphoria. They started it in 2019, so they both started in 2019, so they both had filming during the pandemic. Euphoria's on HBO, the L Word's on Showtime. Very controversial showrunners, lots of behind the scenes issues, and most important of all, the lead of the L Word Generation Q is the only other actor that I can think of, certainly in recent years, that spoke very loudly and did the exact same thing that Zendaya did to let it be known their feelings on season 3 and the final season of their show, because the L Word also had 3 seasons, and there's a lot of similarities. And again, I know too much about that show. I also have the rare honor of being the first person that actually got to visit the set after the pandemic, after like 2 years. And during the final season of the L Word Generation Q, there was only 2 other people that got to visit during the final season. One was the original L Word showrunner, and the other was the current of that time, Joe Biden's press secretary, but not Kayleigh McEnany, Donald Trump's press secretary that I've mentioned before I went to high school with. Even if I knew nothing about Euphoria, seeing the amount of first and second ADs on their IMDb, I mean, it doesn't necessarily scream something is wrong, but me having a YouTube channel where I talk about controversial behind the scenes things, I'd absolutely look into the show because it would make me think that there could definitely be issues behind the scenes, that they're cycling through so many in 3 seasons and there's 8 episodes a season. There totally could be a reasonable explanation for an insane list of ADs on a smaller show. You can look at so many other shows that are very similar to Euphoria, like The Our Generation Q, like Yellow Jackets, like other HBO shows, and the amount of first and second assistant directors compared to Euphoria's is tiny. Yellow Jackets, which has an entire another season, has half the amount of people that Euphoria does. I would think it was because they either couldn't hold on to first ADs because of the environment, or it was so chaotic that they had to have first AD only working on 2 episodes a season or something like that because it was so impossible to do their job the way they usually would. And this many were required because they needed this many to prepare for everything and anything because they didn't know what they were going to walk into every day. I also heard Zendaya talk about them shooting season 3 in half the time they usually would, which that might also be a contributing factor. And I wouldn't be surprised if they threw everything and everyone at the wall to try and get this show done as quickly as possible because there were so many issues. Maybe even Zendaya, who is known for being an absolute professional, she might have even asked HBO or told HBO that the only way that they were going to get through season 3 is to shoot it in this small window because, of course, a lot of the cast are very, very big stars and have a lot of projects going on now. The reason that I suspect they were able to do Euphoria and why that wouldn't, it probably was a factor with the scheduling of the actors, but that it still got done was because when they all signed to Euphoria in season 1, I haven't seen their contracts. I don't know this for a fact, but I would suspect highly that they all signed Euphoria as their first position, which that means when you sign onto a show and it's first position, it takes precedence above all else, no matter what happens, no matter if your career does blow up and you are Zendaya doing 4 huge, huge movies in 2026, you signed this. And I suspect this very, very highly for the scheduling reason, for the fact they were able to get them all back and stuff, but also because it was so, so chaotic behind the scenes. And they still were actually able to get the 3rd season out, which there was a lot of discussion constantly before the 3rd season came out that was this 3rd season ever going to happen? That's why I do find it funny when some people online will say things like, oh, it's delayed because of the actors, or this one specific actor doesn't want to do the show or doesn't want to do this. It's always these very, very strong contracts that they sign because, especially these shows on HBO, Showtime, or any of the main networks, honestly, any shows that they can get you in first position, especially if you're at the beginning of your career, so especially tons of times there, but they're always going to be tied to that, even if you do have the exact circumstances like Euphoria. I mean, that is the dream scenario, that you sign a bunch of people very early in their career and the majority of blow up and are enormous stars by the end of your show. Yes, there's lots of issues that will develop with that too, but that is a great thing because those people are going to have fans outside and bring people into the show, which is exactly what happened with Euphoria. Even though it was over such a long time that they shot it, it's going to grow organically anyway with streaming and stuff. But I'm sure there is a huge amount of fans that found the show because they became fans of Zendaya or Jacob Elordi through other means and these other movies and shows that they've done in the intervening years. And you're just never going to have someone say, oh, I can't do it. You know, everybody has to rearrange their schedule. That's why they have these contracts. People used to say that all the time about Stranger Things and, oh, Millie Bobby Brown, it's delayed because she's doing this, she's doing that, which is even funnier because Netflix, most of her movies, if not all of them, were shot with Netflix, and Netflix isn't going to delay its biggest show for Enola Holmes too. Of course, there are exceptions and changes, like Barbie Ferreira. She left the show before season 3, and there were a lot of rumors and discussions in the media that she walked off set and that she left the show due to issues with Sam Levinson and creative differences. She has given a lot of interviews where she's gone against this and said it wasn't true and she didn't walk off set, that she left because she didn't feel fulfilled creatively. And it's always so hard to say in these situations because, of course, you want to believe someone when they're saying that's not true. But my experience is there's no smoke without fire. And when there's a lot of discussion, especially when it makes it into the mainstream and every story is very similar, a lot of the time there's truth to it. And I know plenty of stories where there's showrunners that despise actors, vice versa, actors that absolutely despise each other and have massive issues. And I know situations where one actor has been pushed out of a show, which I'll talk about in a second, because of the problems between other actors. But of course, they're not going to say in an interview, oh, yeah, that's true. Like, I walked off set or I had these issues. To be accused of being difficult, walking off a set, that can be an absolute death blow to an actor's career. So they're going to deny it. And the other people, Sam Levinson, HBO, they're not going to say anything because it also doesn't make them look good. I will also add, though, that Barbie did a bunch of interviews with like Deadline and Variety and the Daily Beast and talked about leaving season 2. And her comments did make me think there was more issues with her and Sam Levinson just because of the subtle shade that, in my opinion, was thrown in the interviews. For example, and in this, she's talking about her acting range and her creative process. She says, if Euphoria was going to serve that for me, I would have happily done it forever, however long it would have been. But it wasn't really letting me show my range. In fact, it was kind of diminishing as time went on. And it was like, what makes me happy is acting and growing my career. Hollywood is an absolute disaster right now. They want everyone to be squeaky clean. And if you aren't, there's thousands of people that are. And so when you're not Brad Pitt, you will just be interchanged with someone else. And I know cast members that have had huge issues. There was a cast member on the L Word reboot. She's actually on the pit now, Seppi Moafi, and she was pushed off the L Word reboot by the lead actress who was on the original, was an executive producer, and also had issues with the showrunner. And Seppi was pushed off that show. And even despite that, if you see any of them mention each other now, it's all sunshine and rainbows, even on like stupid things like Instagram. To actors and especially networks and shows, their image is everything. It is not you or I going on and liking our friend's Instagram, putting pictures of our cat. It is all so carefully curated, even down to who they are following on Instagram. And that's why I was saying before, it's absolutely a genius move that Zendaya doesn't follow anyone on Instagram, not even Tom Holland. But these celebrities, they care about their image and the optics of their image above all else. I mean, the understatement of the year, right? With season 2 of Euphoria, as I said, the discussion in the media absolutely explodes about the behind the scenes, the controversies. There's pieces in the New York Times, Rolling Stone, The Hollywood Reporter, And HBO issues a very carefully worded denial when it comes to reported complaints about background actors and extras in particular, as there's a big story in the Times about it. Of course, the usual push the story out on Friday afternoon, hoping that it gets buried in like the weekend shuffle. But the statement reads, the well being of cast and crew on our productions is always a top priority. The production was in full compliance with all safety guidelines and guild protocols. It's not uncommon for drama series to have complex shoots, and COVID protocols add an additional layer. We maintain an open line of communication with all the guilds, including SAG AFTRA. There were never any formal inquiries raised. And I find that very interesting that they say nowhere in there that there wasn't issues. They carefully worded the denial, and they also went on to say there's no formal inquiries through like SAG after raise. And that's interesting because most background actors usually aren't under SAG AFTRA. There is a way that background actors can get their SAG card through background work, but it's very hard to do. I don't know whether they still do this. I'm pretty sure they do, but there is these type of vouchers that you can get, and you have to get, I believe it's 3 to get your card through being a background actor, because it's really hard. I've talked in other videos about how hard it is to get into the Actors Guild or Directors Guild, because if you don't have the card, it's really hard to book acting jobs, to book directors' jobs. They have to get like actually cast in some sort of speaking role or guest star role or something like that. Or they get 3 of these background actor vouchers that have to come from a union production, and there's all other sorts of things, and it's really not as simple as, oh, just going to any extra background work for 3 movies or shows, and then oop, all of a sudden you're SAG eligible. And some like very minor roles will say things like SAG eligible, and so if they book one of those roles, then they can get into the guild. So for that reason, it would be very unusual that any sort of formal inquiry would be raised through SAG after, because most people who are working as background extras, there's a lot of people who just do it for fun or do it for like a bit of extra money, but there's a lot of people who will do it in hopes of just filling in work until they can get a speaking role or whatever their goal is. Usually there's a fair amount of background actors who they want to move up the ladder. And I know some of my regular viewers probably picked up on that specific language and not outright saying there was no issues, there was no this, because of course they're going to keep it as general as possible. But a lot of the time, not even networks, but sometimes actors, directors, they don't want to outright deny something that is true because they don't know what's going to come out, what evidence someone might have that could come out 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years from now. And so they will just always keep it as vague as possible, but try and at least have something that is saying, oh, there was no formal inquiries, we're all good, as if that would be the definition anyway, even if it was actors that you were saying, well, they didn't raise any formal inquiries. Well, they don't have to raise a formal inquiry for there to be issues behind the scenes. So there's over 4 years between the airings of season 2 and season 3, and season 2 ends airing in February 2022. And as we discussed, I don't believe the actor schedules were the issue with the long periods between the 2 seasons. It seems much more likely that it was Sam Levinson's other show, The Idol. And there have also been several stories that have mentioned The Idol being the issue that caused the delay. And there's been a lot of anonymous sources that have specifically said Zendaya allegedly spoke to HBO about this massive gap and about The Idol being the cause of it, because allegedly the conversation between Zendaya and HBO, it was to do with the fact that the scripts haven't even been started when Sam Levinson was filming The Idol. Because, of course, as we talked about, Sam Levinson is writing all of the script. It's not a traditional writer's room where another showrunner, okay, the other writers could be at least starting the scripts or writing half of the season, or he only needs to do the premiere and the finale. But there was also major issues with the production of The Idol, and so it wasn't only that The Idol delayed it, but The Idol had delays, which delayed Euphoria even further. They actually filmed season 2 April through November of 2021. So most shows like this with 8 episode shows like Yellow Jackets, The Boys, shows on HBO and Showtime, their writers will usually go back a few weeks to a month or so after the prior season has finished airing. Of course, that's not absolute, that can change a lot. But for instance, Yellow Jackets, when they went back to write season 3, it was about a month after season 2 had aired. But with Euphoria, you'd expect Sam Levinson to start writing way before that usual sort of window, probably writing it before season 2 had even finished airing because he has to write all the scripts and it's going to take him a lot longer. So, principal photography for The Idol starts a couple of months before season 2 of Euphoria starts airing. They start pre production in November 2021, and come April 2022, they had about 70% of The Idol filmed. And this is 2 months after season 2 has ended for Euphoria. But at this point in April 2022, they decide to scrap the majority of the show and get rid of the director, Amy Seimetz, who I mentioned earlier when I spoke about Petra Collins. Amy was the original director of The Idol, and it was a very, very different show when Amy was producing it. I'd suspect most people watching my channel have probably at least heard about The Idol's controversy a little bit. It was very, very poorly received. It was the worst show of the summer of 2023, probably the worst show of 2023, and there was a lot of discussion on social media about it. The show starred Lily Rose Depp, Johnny Depp's daughter, as a former child teen pop star who was now an adult and dealing with the death of her mother. And she meets this nightclub owner, self help guru, cult leader, Tedros, who's played by The Weeknd. And not only was it received very badly for the story, the writing, but it was just seen as very, very graphic and so unnecessary and in a way like torture, just really creepy. And a lot of people thought that it was just some sort of weird pervy thing that Sam Levinson was doing with this show, and that was not what the show looked like when Amy was working on it. And there's been like some pictures and things that have come out. I'll show them when Amy was working on it, and it was much more about Lily Rose Depp's character and about being a child star and dealing with all that, and it just turned into this weird sexualization with the Weeknd's character and putting Lily Rose Depp in all of these really just creepy situations. So The Idol doesn't finish filming well into the second half of 2022. And then, of course, it's going to go through post production, it's going to go through editing and all of that. And it airs in the summer of 2023. And so, of course, Sam Levinson then has to write all 8 episodes, the entire season of Euphoria. After it's written, they have to go through all of the costumes and sets and getting everything organized. And so they aren't actually able to film season 3 of Euphoria until January 2025. And then that goes through the vast majority of the year. And then, of course, we get it just April and May of this year because post production and editing. Now, to talk about what I was mentioning at the beginning of the video with how I think you can clearly see how Zendaya feels about season 3, the ending for Rue, and her relationship with Sam Levinson, I think there's two very distinct ways that nobody can convince me otherwise that she had major issues with the way the show was written, the way the show ended, the ending for Rue, and also her relationship with Sam Levinson. And the first indication of this was the fact that she removed herself as a producer in season 3. I have never seen this before, with the exception of the L Word Generation Q. And I will tell you, Jennifer Beals on the L Word Generation Q removed her name as an executive producer because she despised the showrunner, hated her writing, hated what was happening with the show. And there was even points that she was doing writing for her character because she just absolutely did not sign off on what was happening with the show. And she actually left for the middle chunk of season 3 because she just didn't want to work with the showrunner anymore, and really disliked it. She was only in the first 2 episodes and the last 2 episodes. And that is such a strong statement. I know it might sound silly or like frivolous, but it is such a huge deal. I would love to know if she still got paid and just didn't want the credit. I'd probably say that if she's had the credit removed, she will have completely removed herself, because when you're an executive producer, as long as it's not some sort of vanity credit on a show like this, you will still be involved in everything. Like, you'll still have all the scripts sent to you. You'll still, or at least your assistant will be in like meetings, and they'll probably like take notes and send it to you. And you'll be fully apprised of like everything that is going to happen on the season, everything that's going to go through your character and all of that. I'd love to know at which point she withdrew her name, like whether it was even before the season, whether it was when she saw the scripts. That would be, oh, it'd be brilliant to know that. But there is no stronger of a statement, in my opinion, that someone can make towards a showrunner or towards their feelings about what's happening with a show, that they are bound to through their contract. And again, I just think this was a massive, massive fuck you to Sam Levinson, because, like a professional, she showed up, she did her job, she saw the show and the character through. But this is a statement. And I know I have a fair amount of viewers who work in the industry, so let me know in the comments if you agree that this is a really strong statement, and if you can think of any other situations where you've seen this happen. And Zendaya has spoken in so many interviews about her wish for the character and what she wanted to happen to Rue. Sam Levinson has recently given interviews saying that it was Angus Cloud's passing that inspired the ending for the character. But for many, many years, Zendaya and Levinson have spoken about what they were hoping for Rue. And the discussion behind the scenes, which of course is just speculation, is that Sam Levinson didn't like that Zendaya had this massively successful career. And then as well, his reputation was not very good. The Idol came out, people really had issues with it. He felt as though Zendaya took a step back from him. And so a lot of people have speculated that the ending for Rue was some sort of him trying to hit back at Zendaya for, I don't know, having the audacity to have a successful career. As I said, Zendaya has spoken in so many interviews about what she wanted for the character. She wanted her to get better. She wanted her to be happy. To The Hollywood Reporter a few years ago, she said, and I know that she can do it because Sam wrote it and Sam is Rue and he's done it. He's proof that there is hope for Rue and anyone like Rue. And from the beautiful letters and people who've reached out, I'm so grateful for those experiences when somebody comes up to me and they speak about Rue and how they've connected to her or whatever part of their healing journey she's been a part of. To me, that is the greatest, greatest gift I can ever ask for. It gives me euphoria and purpose in what I do. So, reading some of these quotes, seeing her speaking in interviews, it again doesn't seem like the biggest leap in logic in the world that she did not agree with the ending of the show and what happened to the character.
Is that we carried her all the way, I think, to hopefully what is rock bottom in a dark moment, and hopefully by the end leave with a sense of happiness, of joy, that there is, I think, hope for her.
The star of the show, who cared about it so much, removing herself as an executive producer before the final season. That is all I need to know. But as if that wasn't a strong enough statement, the situation at the premiere of Euphoria season 3, oh my god, so messy but classy at the same time. There was nothing said, like nobody said anything shady in an interview, but you could just see everything you needed to see through the fact that Zendaya, she did show up like right when they were about to go in and watch it, which that's normal. I mean, it's kind of the order of how big a star is where they show up. So if you see a movie premiere, if the movie premiere starts at 8, at 7 all of like the Z-listers and stuff will show up. Then, probably a lot of like random influencers that are invited and YouTubers, and then you'll get just random other C-listers, B-listers, the biggest stars, they're all going to show up at the very end. And that's why you sometimes don't get like a lot of interviews if it's a movie and there's a lot of big stars in it, because they all want to show up at the end. So they'll all show up 5 minutes before they put the movie on. And so there was reports that she didn't stay and watch the episodes, but I saw people that were like in watching it, and people had like pictures with her and stuff. So she did absolutely stay. And as I've said numerous times, like she is known as a very professional person, so I definitely imagine she did. But there is a video that someone took of Zendaya showing up, and she took pictures alone at the premiere. She didn't take them with anyone else, which again, I think speaks volumes. I think the fact that she didn't take them with anyone might have been because she didn't want to take some with allegedly Sydney Sweeney. And so, in the same vein, I promise you all these things tie together, in the same vein as her saying, I'm not following anyone on Instagram because I don't want any of this like bullshit, like, oh, she unfollowed her, she's not following Sydney Sweeney. And so by just showing up and not taking pictures with anyone and doing it all herself, nobody could say, oh, well, look, she took pictures with all these people and not Sydney Sweeney and maybe two other people. And so it means that and stuff. So that's of course just my interpretation. And also, when she had taken her pictures, very few, by the sign and the whole step and repeat, and she's of course walking with her, I imagine, her publicist and everything, and they're walking past Sam Levinson. They stop. She knows there's cameras and everything. She gives him a hug, and she goes to walk, I'm assuming, into the auditorium. And Sam Levinson, you can't hear what he's saying, but it seems he's like indicating to where the step and repeat is, which is like, the background that they take like the pictures on the red carpet with. And he's like pointing, and it looks like he's saying, we take, like, let's take a picture. And she just books it. And you see her publicist, who Zendaya's publicist must be absolutely amazing regardless, but he is awesome at his job, the way, because that's the publicist's jobs, like they will intervene for you, and so you don't have to say no, I'm not taking a fucking picture with you. And he just kind of gently leads her away, and they're off, and there is no picture taken. And you can even see when she's already got her back completely turned and is walking off, Sam Levinson is still standing there like saying something. And I imagine if there wasn't a lot of cameras there, that it would have been a very different interaction. I promise you I'm going to stop over analyzing this video, but I just want to draw your attention to the look that Zendaya gives her publicist. So when she turns to go, she looks at the publicist, and of course, knowing that they're at a premiere, there's thousands of people there, there's hundreds, potentially thousands of people filming this interaction. She also knows this is the only interaction they're having. People are going to comb over this and look at everything. And so she is probably saying, don't react, don't make a face, don't have any sort of thing anybody can read into. But there is an ever so slight widening of her eyes, and she gives the publicist the look. And I know most people will know what I'm talking about, especially a lot of women, where you give your friend, or in Zendaya's case, your publicist, a look that says, get me the fuck away from this man. And they literally run away from Sam Levinson. She was not letting him get that picture no matter what. And I know this video has brought me a lot of joy watching it. I found it so funny, but there is so much to the way that Zendaya has conducted herself through the season 3 promotion or lack thereof promotion for season 3 because again, I just think this is another way that it is pretty obvious her feelings on the show because she was someone who cared so much about the show and Rue and has spoken so much about how she wanted Rue to get a happy ending, get better, everything like that. So I will go into that in just a second and what she has put out on social media, what she said, and even what her mum has said about how the show ended. But again, the star of the show not taking a picture with the showrunner, that is all I need to hear. I wouldn't even have to see that interaction, but that interaction as well. Again, just my interpretation, but I was absolutely cracking up when I first saw that video because I just thought, good for you, girl. Good for you that you are standing by, not giving in to, oh, I'll just do it or whatever. And she didn't give him what he wanted, clearly, because that picture of him and her at the Euphoria premiere, all smiles, all of his people, I'm sure, would have been sending out, oh, they must be fine. Oh, all of that must be bullshit because look, they're standing on the red carpet smiling together. And I would imagine that was a big reason why she didn't want to. Hi guys, editing Ash here. I don't know what happened, but there's like a bit of the audio that got garbled, corrupted here. So I'm just gonna jump in and discuss what is originally in this bit. And that was just a bit about Zendaya's social media and promotion of season 3, which is the lack of promotion for season 3. As previous seasons, Zendaya did so many interviews and posted a lot on social media and talked about the show a lot, talked about Rue as a character, talked about the storyline, how she felt overall about the show. And it could not be more clear to me again. Even this would set off my alarm bells without running away from the showrunner or taking your name off as an executive producer. Because the fact that you have these other 2 seasons, you see everything clear as day, and she is someone who generally does post a lot about her projects and does a lot of interviews and things like that. I think that this just is another indication of how she feels because I just think it's very clear to see even the few interviews that she does do like at the premiere, she doesn't talk about the character, she doesn't talk about the storyline. She says things like, "Oh yeah, it was really crazy that we had to film it in this short period of time compared to what we normally get." Or, "Yeah, it's wild that it's over."
Seen, what should we expect?
I've seen a little bit, but there's gosh, it was a whirlwind. I usually did what I do in 8 months in like 4 months.
She doesn't in any way like address anything. She's done no post interviews. The only thing she posted was the trailer. And I don't know HBO's contracts. Obviously, I don't know Euphoria's, but my experience is most productions, as far as like even using the L word as an example, and I know sometimes people are like, I don't use like when you use examples from other things, but I don't know. It's just HBO's contracts. So this is just me trying to back up what I'm saying. But with the L word season 3, it was the exact same thing. There was so much controversy behind the scenes. Cast hated each other, showrunner and cast hated each other. And when it came time to post the season 3 trailer, you can actually go and watch this live because the showrunner and Showtime were texting me on live when someone had sent me a trailer they didn't want released. And I put it out, and there's a whole other thing too. I'll link it below if you want to know more. But the whole thing with trailers is most of the time they aren't contractually obligated to post it on their Instagram, but of course they will because they want the project to be successful. With the L word, it used to be like an email that we'd get. Maybe I can find the email that I have from the season 3 one where it'll say the trailer is going to come out on the 1st of June at 7 p.m. Eastern. And that would send the trailer, and then 7 p.m. Eastern, everybody's going to post it. And with the L word, because there was so much controversy and everybody hated each other, it was lots of them didn't post it, or some of them would post it a day later, and oh, some of them then would post it only on their stories, and it turned into this whole, it was always, there was always nobody could just be like, oh, I'm just going to post the trailer. And so I see this again as Zendaya just being, I'm going to be professional, I'm going to post the trailer so they can't say, oh, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, but I'm not doing any of the going and talking about the show, going and doing extra interviews, talking about how this was a good ending or whatever, because again, I just don't think she could be more clear about her feelings on the show, on Sam Levinson. The woman was literally running away from it. But regardless, I did also see that her mom actually put up a story saying, I've got loads of messages about the ending. I'm just going to keep my thoughts to myself, which again, just so great because it's saying everything without saying anything, without being messy, without HBO or whomever being able to come and say, you said this or you posted this or blah, 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 blah. But if she was going to be positive, wouldn't she just say, what a great ending? We're so happy with it. I'm so happy with it. My daughter loved it. What's the only reason you wouldn't say anything? So I did think that that was really funny too, that her mom did the exact same thing. There's so much stuff with all the social media things. I honestly think that it would be so interesting to do a video about all these little like intricacies behind the scenes about, oh, what are the obligations and this and that. But I don't know whether that people would be, I feel like that's maybe like a Patreon like members video, because I feel like only certain people would be really interested in that. But I just love, I mean, hence me having this channel. Like, I just love talking about this stuff. I just find it so interesting. A few times a decade, a show comes out that seems to dominate the media landscape. And in 2016, Netflix launched one of the first streaming shows that felt like everyone was watching and everyone was talking about: Stranger Things. Stranger Things was originally intended as an anthology series, but due to its popularity, the show has gone on for 5 seasons produced over a decade. Stranger Things has been a massive win for Netflix, its creators, and its cast, but while everything looks perfect on the surface, things have not been so smooth behind the scenes, with the Stranger Things creators and certain cast members facing a number of controversies. And with the final season about to release, it seems as though Stranger Things is facing its biggest controversy yet, as the latest on-set allegations concern 2 of the show's biggest stars, Millie Bobby Brown and David Harbour. And on top of all of the allegations David Harbour is facing from the Stranger Things set, he's also making headlines offset for all the wrong reasons. So that's what we'll be discussing today: the behind the scenes stories from Stranger Things, the on-set tensions and allegations, the drama surrounding David Harbour, including stories from Marvel sets and Harbour's other co-stars that have never spoken about him before. So sit back, relax, grab a drink and a snack, and let's dive in to the chaotic, messy, and upside down world of Stranger Things. In 2013, the identical twins Ross and Matt Duffer came up with an idea for a series inspired by their favorite childhood 80s movies like E.T. and Stand By Me. At this stage, the Duffer Brothers' IMDb page was extremely sparse, as they only had a few projects listed that were short student films that they had done while they were in college and film school. 2 years later, in 2015, when they got to finally pitch their limited series idea, they still hadn't had an abundance of experience and had only just started working as writers on their first TV show, Wayward Pines. Also in 2015, the brothers released their first film called Hidden. The script for Hidden had actually been acquired in 2011, so 2015 really seemed to be the Duffer Brothers' year, with their first film and their first TV show coming out. But for the Duffer Brothers, 2015 was about to get even better. The Duffers pitched their limited series to a dozen or so production companies, but no one was interested, and they were often told to eliminate the kids from the focus of their story and make it adult and more scary. The Duffer Brothers ended up getting a booklet of their series rendered. It had storyboarding and pictures and the entire story they wanted to tell in a little booklet, and they sent this out to a number of people, one of which was Sean Levy, who is well known in the industry. One of the last things he did was Deadpool and Wolverine. The addition of Sean Levy was a massive assist to the Duffer Brothers, and Levy helped them pitch their series to Netflix. Although the brothers were very inexperienced, Netflix really liked the idea, and they were looking for original content at that time after the success of shows like Orange is the New Black and House of Cards. Netflix were so keen on the story, in fact, that within 24 hours of their meeting, they purchased the limited series of 8 episodes with a few concessions, one of which was that they had to move the series out of the expensive to film in New York and the show be given a new setting, which ended up being Indiana. Netflix was taking a big gamble on the unknown at the time Duffer Brothers, as although they had huge successes like Orange is the New Black as a Netflix original, the Duffer Brothers show was not only going to be a Netflix original, but it was going to be the first show to be entirely produced by Netflix. The brothers and Sean Levy pitched Netflix in March 2015, and just 1 month later in April, Netflix had made the announcement that the new series, which was still then called Montauk, was going to be happening. 2 months later, in June, Winona Ryder was the first to be cast playing Joyce Byers, and Winona Ryder had never had a role on TV before. Her only stipulation was around the Beetlejuice sequel revival that she and Tim Burton were working on at that time, and that we now know did come to be. Her only stipulation was that if this movie did end up happening, that they would work around her schedule so that she could do that project no matter what. And we will come back to discussing casting and other projects and contracts when we discuss what's happening today with the press and everything that's happening with the final season. Also in June 2015, David Harbour was cast as the other adult lead role. That month, there also was the major retooling of the original idea that Netflix wanted, including moving it out of New York. And Netflix has called this period that they were majorly changing things up and retooling it as a creative evolution of the show. In August 2015, the rest of the show was cast, mainly the kid characters. And although a lot of the kid actors had done roles here and there before, this definitely was a big step up for all of them and the first major lead role for the majority of them. Millie Bobby Brown was cast as Eleven, Finn Wolfhard as Mike Wheeler, Gatton Mazzaro as Dustin Henderson, Caleb McLaughlin as Lucas St. Clair, and Noah Schnapp as Will Byers. They were primarily playing the younger kids, and then some of the older kids and teens were played by Natalia Dyer as Nancy Wheeler, Charlie Heaton as Jonathan Byers, and Joe Carey as Steve Harrington. Last to be cast for the first season was Matthew Modine, who ended up playing Dr. Martin Brenner. Shannon Pruser in the first season played a small but very impactful role once the show came out. There was a kind of cult following towards her character, Barbara Holland, and later seasons of the show added other cast members, primarily Sadie Sink as Max Mayfield, Priya Ferguson as Erica Sinclair, Maya Hawke as Robin Buckley, Brett Gelman as Murray, Darcy Montgomery as Billy, and Jamie Campbell Bower as Vecna. With the show cast the following month in September 2015, production officially began on Stranger Things. The show shot through the end of 2015 with each of 8 episodes taking about 11 days to film each, but as the seasons continued, the amount of days it took to produce the episodes skyrocketed, with the last season of Stranger Things that's about to come out taking about 48 weeks, almost a year, to shoot the entirety of the 8 episodes. The show was supposed to be a one and done limited series when it was first being tooled, but halfway through the production, Netflix came to the Duffers and asked them to do more and see if they could expand the series further. Stranger Things Season 1 was released in its entirety in July 2016, and it wasn't just a success, it was an absolute phenomenon. It did also kind of go on to destroy television as we know it, because it was a huge contributing factor as to why we now get these 8 episode seasons every 2 years, or in the case of Stranger Things, more than 2 years. The final season of the show, season 5, is currently 2.5 weeks away from being released when I'm filming and hopefully releasing this. So it will be coming in mid-November 2025. And the last season of the show, season 4, came out in the summer of 2022. I've had 3 Halloweens in this little gnome house that I live in, and I've never watched a new episode of Stranger Things in this house. The last time that I watched the new season, I was in the house before this one. The show's success continued to grow through amazing positive reviews. The novelty and the popularity of the binge model also really helped, because it was a novelty when Stranger Things first came out. The cheapness at the time also of a Netflix subscription, it meant that people hearing so many good things about Stranger Things, it wasn't too much to purchase and then go on and have a monthly subscription. It's certainly not what it costs today, along with the fact that people could also share their accounts back then too. The show came out at exactly the same time all over the world, which I really do think sometimes that they don't take into account how massive that is, because I think that is a lot to do with like YouTube and things as well, that it just can be viewed at the same time by everyone. And people, especially now, talking about things on social media and stuff, that can be a big factor. And mentioning social media, at this time in 2016, we also were in this new world of sharing everything we watch, talking about everything, doing reviews of episodes on YouTube and all the stuff like that. So the show just spread like wildfire. It was a runaway hit for Netflix and the Duffer Brothers and its cast, because they all became massively famous overnight, especially the young kids who were praised for their performances. And they even had them like at the Oscars delivering pizza and things, because it was a phenomenon. As I mentioned, the first season of the show was devised by the Duffer Brothers as a self-contained story, but when halfway through production, Netflix was like, can we not do some more? They had already started to think of stories. And with Netflix looking at Stranger Things numbers and seeing what a hit it was, a season 2 really was a no-brainer. Stranger Things 2 was greenlit, and the fact that the show was originally devised as standalone kind of worked out hugely in the favor of the cast, especially the young stars. The cast originally signed on for a limited series, so they needed to sign new contracts for season 2 onward. During the first season, it was reported that the kid cast were making around $20,000 an episode, but given how popular the show was and how instrumental they were to it, it's being reported today that all of the kids are earning, or former kids are earning, well into the 6 figures, and some of the biggest stars are earning around $250,000 per episode. I say former kid cast because obviously the series has been in production so long, 10 years from when they started filming in September 2015 to the final season being released this month, November, and next month, December 2025. So it's been a decade. The kids are all well into adulthood. Some of them are even married and have kids themselves. Now, I will expand on this later because I think it really plays into a lot of the stuff with David Harbour and Millie Bobby Brown, but just put a flag in it for the moment. I think that the cast, especially the kids, signed on for 2 more seasons, with seasons 2 and 3, and then they had new contracts for season 4 and 5, and I'll explain why I think that happened. And I think it is one of those puzzle pieces that may indicate why there's certain issues between cast members and things, or might even be just a contributing factor and where some tension has come from, but we will get into that in just a second. It could also be that they signed contracts for season 2 and 3, and then there were like major changes that happened in the contract season 4 and 5, because there are some little things that on the surface look like super insignificant, but in the sort of TV world, especially a show like this, they mean a lot. And I will explain all that in just a second. Season 2 of Stranger Things went immediately into production once all the new contracts and everything were signed. And the second season consisted of 9 episodes, which were released in October 2017, a year and 3 months after the first season. But as I said, this timetable would not continue. There were almost 2 years between season 2 and season 3, with the third season being released in July 2019. Stranger Things continued this 2 years between production cycles, but season 3 and season 4 ended up having an additional year tacked on due to the pandemic, meaning season 4 came out almost to the day 3 years after season 3. Season 4 is also the first time all the episodes were not released at once. They ended up releasing the first 7 episodes in May of 2022, and in July, they ended up releasing the final 2 installments. By this stage, Netflix was reportedly paying $30 million to produce an episode of the show, meaning that season 4 was estimated to cost upwards of $270 million. But that was nothing on the upcoming season 5, which is being reported to have cost between 50 and 60 million per episode, meaning the final season of Stranger Things has reportedly cost upwards of $500 million. And all of that and everything we've discussed so far is very important context for everything we're going to discuss, because the fact this was the majority of the cast's first big role, these roles that have made up the majority of their careers, and the fact that this was the true first Netflix original that they produced everything for, that it was a massive juggernaut, and that it's costing $500 million to produce, it means there are a lot of things on the line, and they are important for what we're going to go into now. The first crack in the perfect PR package that was Stranger Things happened just before the premiere of Stranger Things 2 in October 2017. The actor Charlie Heaton, who played Jonathan Byers on the show, who is actually British, was stopped by security at the Los Angeles International Airport. Custom agents had used a dog and found what they called a trace amount of cocaine. Heaton wasn't arrested, but he was denied entry into the US and sent back to London. In official statements, Heaton described it as an immigration issue. This story around Heaton absolutely exploded because, one, Stranger Things was super popular. Everybody was anticipating the new season. Netflix had also pushed forward this squeaky clean image of the cast, especially the young cast, and the fact that there was a huge amount of PR and marketing driven towards Stranger Things to hype up the new season of the show. So, of course, anything controversial, it's just going to pour gasoline on that story. Netflix's PR went into overdrive, and while Heaton did release originally the immigration issue, he did put out a statement, and Netflix just quietly dropped him from a lot of the press appearances, and obviously he didn't make it to the premiere after being denied entry. Obviously, Netflix have an army of lawyers and all the money in the world, but as a fellow British-Irish person who had a visa and then a green card to the US, I wouldn't want to be dealing with that, because even though he wasn't arrested, having any sort of black mark or being denied entry, it does not make your life easier. And I'm sure for years afterwards, if not still, because there is more scrutiny when entering the US, I'm sure he was still dealing with questions. And even Netflix probably had to really help with getting work permits and things like that renewed. That's just based on my experience. It was always, you do not want to do anything at all, like even the most minor of things, because it really can impact your situation with visas and green cards and all of that, because you are a guest in the country without being a citizen. According to quite a few people I spoke to, including people who worked at this time, not on Stranger Things, but at Netflix in like the law and PR departments. This was when the cast, the Duffer Brothers, and just anybody to do with the show had a bit of a, oh shit, this decision by one of these young actors could really, really cause some issues for the show. And this is when they decided that they were going to have a lot of media training and really tightly control the media coaching for especially the young cast, because they were obviously growing up and they're going to start living their own lives and doing things. And of course, like they go through media training before, but this episode incident was really defining for how they would do things going forward with PR and marketing. And you can see now, like, they are all very well media trained and have had very tight media coaching. And that will also become relevant when we talk about some things that are going on currently. But Heaton eventually returned, rehabilitated his image, and he continued working on the show and is, of course, in the final season. But this definitely was the first little crack in the kind of wholesome veneer of Stranger Things. 5 months after the second season premiered and after the situation with Heaton, there were the first signs of on-set controversy that went mainstream, and these concerned the Duffer Brothers themselves and how they were allegedly running their set and treating their crew members, especially the female crew members. A former Stranger Things grip alleged that showrunners Matt and Ross Duffer had created a verbally abusive and toxic environment on set, especially towards women. The woman who spoke out worked in the grip department. Her name was Peyton Brown, and she actually worked under her father, I believe, in the grip department. And when she came forward, she had a ton of pictures and things on Instagram with the cast. A lot of the younger cast followed her, doing social things together. And once she came forward, they all like unfollowed her, and there was kind of a pullback from anybody that was associated with her on the show. The story didn't really get much traction in the beginning, but then a few other women from the show spoke up and backed up Peyton. The most experienced person from the show that spoke out in support of Peyton was a script supervisor called Lori Grabowski. She is a very experienced script supervisor, and she actually worked on the entire first season of Stranger Things and all of the second season except for the last 2 episodes, which is kind of odd that she worked on the first 7 and not the last 2 when she'd done the first season as well. If you don't know what a script supervisor is, it's one of those roles on a set that kind of sounds like it's something different than it is. The script supervisor's main role is continuity, and they do have a lot of jobs like preparing daily reports for the production team and logs, and they usually are the ones involved with the second camera assistant and the production sound mixer with the slate and like lining things up so that the camera and the sound slates have like the same numbering and everything. And by slate, I mean one of these that is like one of the first things that you think of when you think of a set. As I said though, their main role is continuity, and I've used this example before, but it'd be like if I had a script supervisor, the way sometimes you'll see me cut and I'll be talking, G will be sitting like this, and then I'll cut, and then she'll be over here. A script supervisor would be like, Gloria, you were sitting up like this. You have to stay sitting up like this for when we do, I'm shooting this way, facing the camera towards you. If I had another camera over here and they're going to cut to that one, they'd want G to be in the same position. On a set, it's obviously so much more complicated than that because people don't talk directly into the camera, which is something you have to get used to doing, let me tell you. And they'll have things like, somebody's drinking a drink, you picked it up with your left hand and it had this much liquid left in it. And even things like people get injuries in the beginning of a movie and it's still there by the end, and making sure everything is the same. And on good TV shows, they'll have a show bible which will like go through everything like about the characters. Like if you said in an episode a character has a sister, if you said they went to a certain university, and all of that stuff is like obviously important because it really takes you out of a show whenever they said, oh, they're an only child, and then a sister pops up in season 5 or something like that. So the script supervisor is pretty integral to shows like this. And Lori Grabowski seems like a very experienced script supervisor because she's worked very consistently since 1996 and has done huge projects like Scream 4, Avengers Infinity War, Age of Ultron, Deadpool and Wolverine, Guardians of the Galaxy, Black Panther, The Vampire Diaries, Spider-Man Homecoming, Loki, Only Murders in the Building, and that is literally a tenth of the projects that she's done. As I said, Lori worked on 2 full seasons almost of Stranger Things. Her last episode was The Lost Sister, which most Stranger Things fans believe is by far the worst episode of the series. You can actually see Lori's name in graffiti in one of the Chicago scenes of this episode. That episode was actually supposed to be titled differently. It was supposed to be titled The Lost Brother because the main focus in that episode was supposed to be a male character instead of a female character, but they changed it. And the episode got a lot of criticism, primarily for being a bottle episode, and fans really felt like it halted the story. And really, from the main cast, there was like some archival footage of like other characters, but it was primarily just Millie Bobby Brown's 11 that was in that episode, and it just was something that really didn't resonate with people. With Lori, she ended up coming out and backing up what Peyton was saying by putting a post on her Instagram and saying that Peyton was telling the truth. The story then got picked up and got a lot of traction and started to spread into the mainstream. I think it is pretty significant that Lori spoke up because she is pretty experienced, and as I talk about a lot in videos, one thing about working on set is you keep your mouth shut, especially if you want to continue working. It's why you constantly hear me say, my friend or someone I know, because people do not want to speak out with their name attached. And it's why sometimes I even have to say, and you'll hear me do this later with something with David Harbour, be like, oh, they were teaching David Harbour something, because if I said what the something was, it's very easy to deduce who I'm talking about. Prior to this post, Lori had posted about Stranger Things on her Instagram, and her Instagram isn't something that like she's posting on a ton, but the other time she posted was when she actually had the cast and crew over to watch the 2017 Super Bowl, and in the 2017 Super Bowl, they aired the trailer for Stranger Things. So it was like a really big deal. And she posted a recording of Finn Wolfhard, Noah Schnapp, and Gaten Mazzaro reacting to the trailer. Lori's Insta post, where she backed up what Peyton said, read, I am one of these women Peyton referenced. It was very real, not only to me, but other women on the set that also want to share their story. Peyton Brown witnessed not only my experience, but the similar experiences of others. I don't know Miss Brown very well, but what I do know is that there's absolutely nothing false about her statement. Myself and other women who are willing to share their stories of our experiences on the set of Stranger Things are living proof. I was the script supervisor of the show for nearly 2 full seasons. I just could not stand by and let Peyton be called a liar, because what she said is unfortunately very true. I had no interest in sharing my personal story from working on Stranger Things until I saw so many people accusing Miss Brown of being a liar. I just can't stay silent. After Lori spoke out too, the story went pretty much viral, and the Duffers issued a very carefully worded statement, which you will see pop up more times throughout this video. Their statement read, we're deeply upset to learn that someone felt uncomfortable on our set. High stress nature of productions, tempers occasionally get frayed, and for that we apologize. The brothers qualified the statement by saying, we think it's important not to mischaracterize our set. Netflix did announce an internal review, and they have conducted internal reviews before this Stranger Things one, mainly with House of Cards and Kevin Spacey, which at that time, they didn't find any wrongdoing. Netflix's internal review was quietly concluded a few weeks after, and there was no like public findings that came out. Netflix issued a statement saying that they looked into the concern that was raised when they heard of the allegations and found no wrongdoing. Maintaining a safe and respectful atmosphere on set is important to us, and we know it is to the Duffer Brothers as well. Several of the women who did speak out did end up saying that they were not themselves contacted by Netflix. There was one woman who spoke out about the Duffer Brothers and said that she'd had a great experience on set and she'd never had a better experience, but she didn't disclose in her Instagram post that she was actually dating and is now engaged to one of the Duffer Brothers. Interestingly, Lori has removed her post addressing the Duffer Brothers. It seems like it was sometime later in that year in 2018 because her Instagram was entirely wiped, and that's why I can't be sure when it was erased, because from 2018 it's just like the account didn't exist and all the links and everything are dead. And from that point on her Insta, when she was like starting posting again, she's only mentioned Stranger Things once, and it was when she reposted the Super Bowl reaction video that I was referencing, and she reposted that just a few years ago in 2022. It wouldn't be surprising to me if Lori took it down, since she's still working in the industry and obviously people looking into her for future jobs, she might not want them to see that she'd spoken out, because as I said, that is not the way Hollywood want you to do things. But having friends that work or worked in Netflix's legal department, I wouldn't be surprised if Netflix had something to do with taking it down, considering the last season has cost $500 million and was cost more than $1 billion with all 5 seasons, well more than $1 billion, and also considering everything else we're about to discuss about behind the scenes and the on-set dynamics. The biggest stories circulating right now regarding the behind the scenes of Stranger Things are around David Harbour. He's been in the headlines lately for a number of stories, the 2 biggest of which are 1, the allegations that have come out from his ex-wife Lily Allen, and 2, the allegations about his on-set behaviour around Millie Bobby Brown in particular, and her filing a grievance with Netflix about him and his behavior. In order to explain what is going on with David Harbour at the moment, I do need to explain a little bit about his relationship with Lily Allen and the experiences that people I know have had working on projects, mainly Marvel projects, with David Harbour. So in 2019, Lily Allen and David Harbour met on the celebrity dating app Raya in early 2019. They started attending a few of the same events, and in late 2019 they ended up going official on Instagram, and there were pretty much engagement rumors almost immediately from this point on. And then they did get married the following year in September 2020 in Las Vegas. I'm sure most people know who Lily Allen is. She's a very well-known British singer that has been around for a long time. She started on MySpace, so it has to be over 20 years that she's been around and been pretty significant. And in that time, she herself has had a lot of controversies too, but that is probably something for another video. She has 2 kids from her previous relationship that she was bringing into her relationship with David Harbour. She was previously married to Sam Cooper, and in her relationship with Sam Cooper, it was her who had infidelity, and I will explain a little bit more about that because it ties into some things that's going on now, weirdly. Well, not like ties in, but there's similar sources, let's say, for some situations. So from 2019 through 2023, everything appeared perfect for Lily Allen and David Harbour. They would go to premieres together and events, and they would give interviews where they would reference each other. And Lily Allen continued to do work in the UK, but they primarily lived in the US for David Harbour's acting work. They did do a lot of profile features when they were married, discussing their marriage and life together. And one of the most significant of these was in Architectural Digest. And this is getting a lot of views on YouTube because of some of the unfortunate things that they said in this. And I will, as always, leave it linked below in the sources, but I will also show clips as well. And they ended up doing like a tour of their apartment, like pretty standard in an Architectural Digest video and feature. And I've had a few people actually ask me before, I think it was on my Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis video, why these like big stars would do Architectural Digest and let people into their home and showing what their home is like. Because as a big celebrity, like letting people into your home and seeing your home and even like the layout of your home can be dangerous for some of those really big celebrities, especially for people like Ashton and Mila who have so much fucking money. Like, why would they want to do this? Especially because, as well, like then when they did the Architectural Digest thing, they never showed their kids. They were always like, we're never going to show our kids. They even talked about this before they had kids. And we know now that they needed to use their kids as some sort of shield, and they've thrown them out to the media and stuff. But back then, like, why would they do this? And the answer really is money. And even people that are that rich, a lot of these designers will go to them and say, listen, I'll give you all the stuff in your house for free. I'll furnish your house for free and, design the whole thing if you do this feature in Architectural Digest. And sometimes even the celebrities will approach designers or Architectural Digest and all of that sort of thing. It all comes down to that, which, I mean, I've mentioned before, like Leonardo DiCaprio, all the money he has. And I think it was Versace that did his entire house for free. And it's always the richest people that get stuff for free. It is mind-blowing, but honestly, that's why a lot of them do it. Both Lily Allen and David Harbour have publicly spoken about their mental health struggles and their past issues with substances. So they did have like this thing in the press where it's like, oh, we have this perfect relationship and it's this happy ending for both of us. Even though I think that was kind of the message that Lily Allen was putting out with her first marriage too, when she moved to the country and everything like that, and she'd had all this success in the music industry. I do vaguely remember a big tax issue that she had, which I think had something to do with her having to get rid of her like big house in the country that she had. But if I do a Lily Allen video, I'll look into all of that stuff. But with David Harbour, he really was blowing up, obviously, with Stranger Things and Marvel whenever they got together, because Black Widow was coming out, and then obviously this year we had Thunderbolts coming out, and Stranger Things was well into its huge success. And Lily Allen, she hasn't released an album in the past 7 years. She was mainly focusing on acting, and that really ties into their relationship breaking down because she went to go and do a play in London when they were primarily living in New York. Last year in 2024, there started to be reports of issues between David Harbour and Lily Allen, and over the end of 2024, it was reported in papers like the Daily Mail and on social media that they were splitting up, but it wasn't 100% sure that they were splitting and divorcing at that time. It was just a lot of discussion, and for years, the Daily Mail has reported that there was infidelity on David Harbour's side. At the end of 2024, it then was reported that Lily Allen had been seen back on Raya, the celebrity dating app. And in February 2025, People released an article that said they were splitting up and getting divorced. And that was kind of the exclusive. And from that point on, people were taking it as factual. Prior to the People article, or really any news of their split at all, as I said, the Daily Mail at this point years ago were reporting that David Harbour had been unfaithful multiple times and was having affairs, including one with a costume designer. Since the People article in February, rumors have swirled even more about his infidelity, and God, were they confirmed, coincidentally or not so coincidentally, just as Stranger Things was kicking off the press tour for for their final season, literally 10 days ago. Lily Allen hasn't released an album in over 7 years, and it wasn't even widely known that she was working on a new album. Literally 3 weeks and a day ago from when I'm filming this, on October 19th, Lily Allen announced that she was releasing a new album in 5 days. And on October 24th, she did just that. And again, this was literally when Stranger Things press tour was starting. And in my opinion, there is only the tiniest of tiny, tiny chances that this release wasn't extremely calculated. Now, I'm not a music person at all, like at all. And so when I read this story to begin with, I thought, oh, I'm gonna have to go and speak to like one of my friends that is very talented like musically and will be able to help me understand like the lyrics and things like that. But even someone as dense as me with music, there's no inferring anything. Like, it is literally written black and white what she's trying to say, and none of it is good for David Harbour. The album is all about Lily Allen and David Harbour's relationship and the breakdown of their marriage and his infidelity. In the album, Lily details David asking for an open marriage, which she didn't want to agree to, but she did as she was very in love with him. And Lily was at this point doing a play in London, which was a huge deal for her, but it seems as though David Harbour was not very supportive. I'm showing on the screen a note from him that they posted on social media about the opening day of her play that reads, "My ambitious wife, these are bad luck flowers, because if you get reviewed well in this play, you will get all kinds of awards and I will be miserable, your loving husband." Is this supposed to be a joke? Yes, but given that he was asking her for an open marriage at the time and cheating and apparently not positive about her success, maybe it's one of those like truths in joke things. In the album, she also discusses the rules and stipulations for her agreeing to this open marriage, open relationship. The main one being that he wouldn't have feelings and emotions and that it wouldn't be some sort of relationship with the other person. The rest of the album goes into a lot of details about David's infidelity and his breaking of the rules that they set out for this open marriage, and how Lily grappled with everything, her pain and her discovery of David Harbour not only breaking these rules, but his massive amount of infidelity. As I said, the lyrics are very explanatory and telling. There is even a song titled Palace, where Alan details going into an apartment her and Harbour shared that she apparently thought was a dojo, but was in fact, as she says, a palace. She sings in the lyrics about finding all these handwritten letters from broken-hearted women that David Harbour had been with, and then details finding a Dwayne Reed bag with hundreds of condoms and toys and plugs and lube and more. And Dwayne Reed must have been really happy about the free marketing there. The album absolutely exploded when it was released 5 days after its announcement, and not only did multiple songs chart, the album peaked at number 2 in the UK album charts. The album and songs were critically praised, and given how detailed the lyrics were, discussions exploded on social media, and everybody was talking about everything that was in these lyrics. A massive amount of David Harbour's exes like Julia Stiles and his co-stars like Florence Pugh liked and supported all of Lily Allen's social media posts about her album, and she did post like a ton of stuff about this album, and Florence Pugh was like liking everything. There is this really little interview that I came across, and this is totally me inferring stuff from this interview and my opinion on what I think is going on here based on some things that I've heard from people who work at Marvel. So this could totally be Florence Pugh just saying how much she likes someone else. But there's an interview from when they promoted Thunderbolts, and it's David Harbour and Florence Pugh, and they end up talking about Pedro Pascal. And David Harbour went to school with Pedro Pascal, and he's saying how they went up for the same role in a play at school, and Pedro Pascal ended up getting it. And Florence Pugh goes into like this little bit about how, you know what I really like about Pedro Pascal? He's just such a nice guy and all of this. And especially with like the whole don't worry, darling situation. And again, just some things that people have said that have worked on Marvel sets for a long time. I wouldn't be surprised if this was like a little, yeah, he's super nice and you aren't. So again, that's just me reading the situation. It could be nothing to do with that. I did just want to mention it because I really do find it funny that Florence Pugh has gone through and liked like every single post from Lily Allen's album.
I've been mad at him for 30 years.
It's also just that he's so unbelievably kind. You just instantly feel like he's your friend, and as audience members and also people in the industry, that's just so needed, having someone that is so pure and stands up for the right things and is just a good human. It's lovely to find a good human.
About a week after the release of the album, the Stranger Things final press tour launched, and 2 weeks after the album's release, the Stranger Things season 5 premiere took place. By the time the premiere rolled around, though, there was even more attention on David Harbour because on November 6th, there was a story that came out exactly 1 week after Lily Allen's new album and on the weekend before the premiere. So this happened on November 1st and the premiere was on November 6th. On November 1st, the Daily Mail reported that there was an alleged issue at one point between Millie Bobby Brown and David Harbour when they were filming Stranger Things. The Mail discussed how there were pages and pages of allegations Millie Bobby Brown had made at Harbour, and she also had made claims of bullying. The Mail also reported that Millie had a representative with her on set after this situation, and that she'd filed the harassment and bully claim with Netflix. The story circulated widely after being published in the Daily Mail, and from the article's release, David Harbour was not a part of the other press stuff up until the premiere. His first public appearance after this story broke was at the premiere. We will talk about what happened at the premiere. I just want to talk about the article first, so there's context. The day after the premiere, Variety did release an article where they claimed they had verified what the Mail had reported, or like the fact that there were these allegations. They were filed as a claim with Netflix by Millie Bobby Brown. And the day after, Variety, Deadline also printed an article saying that this took place and that they'd verified the claims. Although Variety and Deadline did say that there were harassment and bullying claims, but they were now dealt with. So when the first article from the Daily Mail came out, of course, a lot of people were very skeptical with it being the Daily Mail. Now, I want to be clear, the Daily Mail is horrendous. It's horrendously invasive. Whenever I have to use it as a source, like when they are the original printer of a story, I even will put like, the Daily Mail, because they just, I mean, everybody knows what the Daily Mail is. It's a rag, and British tabloids are horrendous in general, but they're pretty top of the list. They exaggerate and poke and pry, but I do think a lot of the time there is conflation of scum and untrue. The Daily Mail is a British tabloid, and in the UK, there are extremely strict libel laws, meaning it's extremely easy for people to sue papers and media outlets for, among things, defamation. So a lot of the time, the Daily Mail, they'll be exaggerating, they'll be blowing things up, but there will be some element of truth to a lot of their stories. In fact, Lily Allen actually in November 2010 took legal action against Associated Newspapers, which is the parent company of the Daily Mail, after the newspaper published, ironically, photographs of her home. Also, another Lily Allen Daily Mail tie thing is in September 2018, she ended up posting an Instagram story discussing how she had had paid for intimacy with female escorts in 2014 while she was still married to her first husband, Sam Cooper. Allen had included details of the events in her book, which is called My Thoughts Exactly, but she said that she had made the Instagram post because the Daily Mail were publishing an article about it the following day. So she knew that was coming. When the article first came out in the Mail about Millie Bobby Brown and David Harbour, it mentioned a source being Lily Allen's friend, and that has now been changed. And I'm not saying this is true all of the time, but a lot of the time when an article quotes someone close to X or a friend of X, it's not unheard of for that source to be X or to be X's team at least. Like when you see all these articles about Brooklyn Beckham and Nicola Peltz and how they feel about the feud with David and Victoria, which I do have a video on the Beckhams as well, it's them. It's Brooklyn and Nicola in my opinion. And on the other side, it's David and Victoria's team, in my opinion. And that's just the way it works a lot of the time. Sometimes it'll be teams or agents, managers that are trying to divert a story about someone else, and they'll offer up, hey, we'll give you this story if you don't run this story. That happens all the time, and really a lot in the royal family too. I mean, today everything is videoed and viewed and reviewed and discussed and poured over. I mean, hello. And when there's a lot of frenzy whipping up, like with what's happening with Stranger Things, the premiere, the final season, I think the timing is just too perfect. And maybe that sounds like a little bit conspiracy, but Stranger Things final season is happening. One of the biggest things David Harbour's ever done. This album comes out. There's been no album for 7 years. The Millie Bobby Brown story comes out, especially because that claim about Millie Bobby Brown, it's allegedly something that happened ages ago. So it's only coming out now, like well over a year ago, apparently this happened. And it just seems like that also is information that Lily Allen would be privy to because it was so long ago that she was still married to David Harbour. But what would be the reason for anyone else to release the information at this exact time? And it appears like something like this has happened before with the Daily Mail, as just prior to Lily Allen and David Harbour splitting, and I mean them actually splitting when they did, long before it was public, the Daily Mail printed a number of articles about David Harbour's infidelity. And when you read those stories now, they are pretty accurate, even mentioning, of course, like not by name, the costume designer who Lily calls Madeline in her song. And Madeline is one of the people that David Harbour had an affair with. Also, the fact that Netflix did not issue a denial. That's odd. This is the biggest show on Netflix. They have spent $500 million for the final season. Never mind the money before that for the other seasons. And if this story about Millie and David wasn't true, and it was like a really small story and the album hadn't happened and it was just something being discussed on social media, okay, like, you know, they're not going to say anything and draw more attention to it. But this story was huge. I mean, it is huge still. Like, it's everybody still is talking about it, and because I'm like looking into all this stuff and keep getting fed even more and more about it, and people pouring over like stuff, what's happening, myself included, about what is going on at the premiere and things, and people are still discussing it. It would make all the sense in the world to issue a statement saying it wasn't true. Also, at the premiere, Sean Levy and the Duffer Brothers were asked about the situation, and none of them issued a denial either. The Duffer Brothers said, obviously you understand I can't get into personal on-set matters, but I will say we've been doing this for 10 years with this cast, and at this point, they're family, and we deeply care about them. So, you know, nothing matters more than just having a set where everyone feels safe and happy. I mean, in my opinion, that is like the classic saying nothing. And I mean, we all know how businesses love to say that they're family. Sean Levy said, at the end of the day, that's the job. You have to create a respectful workplace where people feel comfortable and safe. And so we did everything to build that environment. And we're proud of the fact that we did so. I've read a bunch of stories that range from wildly inaccurate to dot dot dot. There's so much noise around it, but the truth is we view this crew and cast as family, and so we treat each other with respect, and that's always been the bedrock. Again, no denial, if there's no truth to this at all, why would you not just say, oh, it's a load of fucking rubbish, like there's no truth to it? And from what I've been told from actual multiple lawyers who worked at Netflix, they don't work there anymore, they work at different streaming services in different studio, but from what they said, if there was something that became a big story, and I mean, there's no bigger story than this, there's no bigger show on Netflix, money wise and everything wise, than Stranger Things. If something is not true and it's getting enough traction, there's no reason that they wouldn't issue a denial. When David Harbour and Millie Bobby Brown arrived at the Stranger Things premiere, they did put on quite a show, and there were a lot of people online that were saying, oh, I knew it wasn't true, look, they're so happy to be around one another, which I don't think you can put much stock in their behavior at the premiere when they're both actors with big careers on the line, promoting a TV series that has been almost 10 years of their life, and $500 million was spent on it. Of course, they're going to pretend like everything is great, especially because neither one of them will have wanted this story out in the media. I know actors that absolutely fucking loathe each other. I know actors that loathe writers, that loathe showrunners. I mean, the L word Generation Q. And you would never know it. Well, the L word Generation Q became very obvious by the end, but you wouldn't know because of course they're going to put on this whole show. And I know there is now a rumor going around that the bullying claim, it coming out, was PR and like a stunt for season 5 of Stranger Things. I personally don't think that that's true. It's such a damaging claim and such a negative story that I just can't imagine they would want it for this particular situation. Don't get me wrong, negative stories get pushed all the time for PR and marketing things. More so what I was talking about earlier, where it'll be like, I'll give you this story if you don't print this story. And a lot of the time it'll be like, I'll give you the story about a B-lister so that you save my A-list client that brings in money. And certain situations like that does absolutely happen, but I just don't think that in this case that is what is happening. I don't think either of these actors would want this story to be used to generate publicity, and neither would Netflix. One of the most beloved relationships, if not the most beloved on the show, and at the core of the show, is the relationship between Millie Bobby Brown's character Eleven and David Harbour's character Hopper. So I just don't think that's what happened. Hi guys, Editing Ash here. I am going to try and be as concise as possible here because I've recorded this section like 5 times because I keep going off on a 10-minute tangent, but I just kind of want to reinforce what I was saying about the show that was being put on with the whole David Harbour and Millie Bobby Brown thing. And it's a premiere for a hugely successful TV show. Like, of course, there's going to be everybody wanting to put their best foot forward, Netflix wanting to look like everything's perfect. But I do feel like that the major focus on Millie Bobby Brown and David Harbour kind of took away from the rest of the cast. And as I said, like for these videos, I watch and read like absolutely everything and everything I possibly can. And I even like when I finished editing this video and now I'm checking it because I'm hoping to post it tonight, I literally went back and rewatched all of the premieres and like the season 5 premiere stream. When I'm looking at all the other premieres, like this one was just so different, and I felt like it kind of took away from like the rest of the kids. Like they were always the focus of the premieres, and there was just a lot of little things that maybe again, you know, that you wouldn't normally look and be like, oh, that's kind of weird, but when I'm watching all the other ones, it just, these certain things stood out. So they would normally have obviously like all the cast doing the picture together, and David Harbour in like the previous years would do like a lot of antics, and you can either say, oh, he was trying to just be fun and all of that, or on the other side I'm sure people will say, oh, he was trying to get a ton of attention on him. And when they're taking all of the picture, he would always lie down in the front of the cast, and he didn't do any sort of antics like that this year, and he'd like mess around with all of like the kid, you know, the younger kids like Finn and Gatton and stuff, and you didn't even see him with any of them at all. It was only with Millie Bobby Brown. And there also was a point where I can almost like hear the meeting, the like PR crisis meeting, because they had Millie Bobby Brown, David Harbour, the CEO of Netflix, and the director of original content at Netflix all stand and take a picture and, you know, do the whole thing together. And I have never seen them do that before with them. Like, it was usually Millie Bobby Brown, the Duffer Brothers, and Sean Levy, and sometimes there'd be like a Netflix person in there too. But it just really looked like, here's our happy Netflix family all together. I'm sure some people are like, oh, you're blowing that out of proportion and seeing something that's not there. And they could just have been taking a picture. Like that's the other side to it. But I also, whenever I was looking at like all of the coverage of the season 5 premiere, there is nothing that is like season 5 premiere, like, oh, the last time the Stranger Things kids go to a premiere. I know they're not kids anymore, but you know what I mean. And it all of the content, and not just through Netflix, like through Entertainment Tonight, Access Hollywood, Extra, all of them were titled Millie Bobby Brown and David Harbour reunite, talk about their special relationship, all of these things. And that's honestly because today you have this problem of people taking sponsorships and all the other stuff I've talked about with that, but you also have this access restriction. I don't even know if there's a word for it, but it's the sort of thing that you will not be invited to premieres or to have a press pass or any sort of event like that if you are actually going to give your opinion or ask good questions, because all of these people who get invited to this sort of stuff, they will toe the Netflix line because they want to be invited to the next thing. And it is in line with sponsorships. Like, you will never see someone like Jenny Nicholson invited to a Disney or a Netflix premiere. Jenny is honestly my favorite YouTuber, and it's why I think it's so important to support people like her. She has over 1 million subscribers. Her videos are amazing. When she releases one, they get like 10, 12, 14 million views, articles in the New York Times and Rolling Stone. And yet you will see people invited to Disney premieres with like, no shade, 5,000 subscribers, but Jenny Nicholson can't get a press pass to a Disney event or invited to a premiere because they don't want someone there giving their authentic opinion or asking good questions. And it's why you get these questions and they're all softballs, or it's the same question over and over again. And that's honestly why today there are so few, I honestly can't think of any off the top of my head, good interviewers and good celebrity interviewers. I honestly could talk about this topic all day because it just goes down so many roads, but I'm gonna wrap this up here. But it's just something to keep in mind with any sort of these stories in the media and things like that, because there are so many people that are putting whatever you see together, and it's not just Netflix or the actors or things, but it's just part of such a big machine, and it's all tied into like, you know, money and all that stuff. And I probably sound like a conspiracy person now, but anyway, back to past me. My personal opinion on what happened after obsessively looking into this like I do, I do think there's truth to this. Do I think it's exactly what the Daily Mail said? No, absolutely not. I think Millie Bobby Brown did file a claim against him. Millie Bobby Brown doesn't also seem like someone who takes a lot of shit, which good for her. She's called out the paparazzi and really scummy journalists before, and put a pin in that for a second later, actually. But the story in general probably has been blown up and exaggerated, and it's not uncommon at all for actors to have issues between one another. I mean, see about half of my videos, if not more. Also, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some serious jealousy or resentment from David Harbour for how much of a star Millie Bobby Brown is. I spoke to some people who worked with him before, again, mainly at Marvel, and a few people who were in more like PA type roles said he kept very much to himself, but then a few others who had a bit more to do with him didn't have a very positive experience. And it also seems to have been pretty well known that he was having these affairs. Apparently, it wasn't just one costume designer, that was a department that he favored. And he also, I heard, was known to take a lot of people away on vacation. And I think that's just another way he was trying to keep things contained, considering he was so publicly married and he's in Stranger Things and Marvel, two of the biggest things in the world. He would go on vacation with people and he would go after people that were working on projects he was, which means that there is a bit more discretion because they are working in the industry and they know how it would impact their careers if they spoke out. Because even though it was reported in places like the Daily Mail for years that he was having affairs, it was never the actual people that he was having affairs with going to the tabloids, which is the risk that you run if you are a movie TV star that's going out to bars and picking people up. And obviously there's things like NDAs and stuff, but I never heard any allegations that he was asking people to sign NDAs or anything like that. That's just something I know that people have mentioned, but I never heard anything about that. One of my friends had a family member who had to work with him to teach him something like individually, and they said that he was just like very rude, tried to like blow off the lessons and stuff a lot, and all around was just like not a positive experience and very like difficult to deal with, and didn't create like a nice environment for anyone around him. Hi guys, editing Ash here, just very, very, very quickly to say that the reason I'm not disclosing what the person was teaching David Harbour is because I think it's very minor spoilers for Avengers Doomsday. And if someone reminds me when Avengers Doomsday comes out, I'll let you know. But I think also it will become obvious when the movie comes out. And it just also, the person will be very identifiable if I said it like now, because obviously people are watching the video now. But just to let you know that. So back to past me. But I will say, especially people who have been at Marvel for a long time, he wasn't top of any of their lists of most difficult to work with. Those spots still belong to Jeremy Renner and Anthony Mackie. But anyway, I've spoken in many videos about how a lot of this behind the scenes issues with actors all come back to ego. I've explained before how certain things can even look like very minor things to us, and stuff a lot of people wouldn't even notice really matters to actors. From everything that's come out about David Harbour and from what people have said about working with him, he does have a massive ego at play, and I wouldn't be surprised if there might have been some element of his treatment of Millie Bobby Brown stemming from what a huge star she's become at such a young age. There's no doubt the kids are the biggest stars of Stranger Things, and Millie Bobby Brown is the biggest star of the kids. So much so, I noticed that something happened in season 4 that seems very insignificant, but to me is actually pretty unprecedented. And I can't think of another example at the time that this has happened. And I think this also points to how big of a star Millie Bobby Brown is and how much she is the star of that show. I said earlier about the re-signing of contracts, and it seems there were new contracts issued at season 4 of the show. In the credits for seasons 1, 2, and 3, the OG stars are in the same order, and the layout is the same. Winona Ryder, David Harbour, and then it starts listing the kids 2 at a time with one on top of the other. It then is after David Harbour, Finn Wolfhard, and Millie Bobby Brown, and then it goes on to the rest of the kids and so forth. But in season 4, they had the same thing, like Winona Ryder, David Harbour, and then they had flipped Finn Wolfhard and Millie Bobby Brown's names. There are also call sheets that have come out that have this same listing, original listing of the order that the credits are in, which how you are in the call sheet really matters to actors. Number one on the call sheet is what everybody wants to be. That's the star, that's the person that's making the most money, and all of those things. It also, like in movies, it ties into poster and how your name is and everything like that. There are hours and hours of meetings and clauses in contracts and negotiations and arguments over how your name appears in the credits. I'm sure there are other examples, but I honestly can't think of any where it has been the original stars of the show and names have been moved in the credits without anyone leaving the show. So shows like Buffy and Charmed are good examples when someone leaves. Like in Buffy, when Anthony Stewart Head left, he was the person who had like the end credit with and Anthony Stewart Head as Giles. So that's usually the person who's the biggest name, but not the lead. And so when he left, Alison Hannigan got that spot and had Alison Hannigan as Willow. And a lot of the time when cast are executive producers, they'll flip the order of whatever they are in the acting credits. They'll flip those for the executive producers. The stuff is so negotiated by agents and managers. Millie Bobby Brown is with William Morris, which I actually had a meeting with them last summer about signing with them, and they were super nice and the meeting was great. But when I looked into like YouTubers who have done that and have signed with either them or with other people, it really seemed to me, and this is like no shade at all, it really seems like you just become more like the face of the channel. And there's a lot, because they obviously they give you like a lot of resources too. Like they will build you a set and like get you editors and script writers and researchers and all this stuff. And that's why usually when people sign, a YouTuber will sign with them, you'll see like the production like output pick up majorly. And when I looked at people who had done that, it just wasn't what I wanted to do. And again, like no shade whatsoever. I'm sure they're like, you're dumb girl, like you could make so much more money, but I like all the researching and writing and stuff. And so that is just not what I wanted to do. But they do, agents and managers, like they negotiate ton like everything for you. And like with YouTubers, it's sponsorships and all of that stuff and other things, tours and whatever. And with actors, it is these things. And usually it's how big the star is, how relevant they are to the production, and how good the agent is. And I mean, William Morris, they are one of the biggest in the world. Obviously they did a good job with this because, again, I've never seen names flip like this before. I'm assuming when they signed on for season 4, they signed on for season 4 and 5, so I'd expect the credits to be the same in season 5. But if Millie Bobby Brown is billed after Winona Ryder, or she's on the same page as David Harbour, then I can't imagine the fights that happened. But I don't think that will happen, because it's probably highly likely that season 4 and 5 was like the same deal they signed together. But that would be wild. Usually what they do in a situation like this, where they're signing a new contract and someone wants equal billing, they'll do this weird layout. So if Millie Bobby Brown was like, I want to be bumped to be equal billing with Finn Wolfhard, I don't want my name under his, they will usually have this thing where they do the first name, like usually it's the person who was the lead. They'll have Finn Wolfhard on the left side, because in English you read left to right, but his name will be lower. And then they'll have Millie Bobby Brown's on the right, but higher. And they do this in the movies all the time. The most recent example I can think of is A Simple Favor 2. Anna Kendrick was the lead in the first one. She had the first name placement on the left, but I'm assuming Blake Lively wanted equal billing for the second one. And so on all the promotional material and the credits and posters and all of that, Anna Kendrick has that left side lower placement. Blake Lively has higher right placement. It doesn't happen as much in TV shows. And it's funny, when I was writing this, I was sitting there thinking, what's a recent example of a TV show one? And literally was staring me in the face. I was watching the new drama Murdaugh series that has just come out. They're still releasing episodes of it. I think the 7th episode came out today. And I do actually have a video on the Murdaugh murders too. That was like one of my first videos that did really well. And on that show, they have the leads in this equal billing placement. They have Jason Clarke, lower left, Patricia Arquette, top right, because Patricia Arquette is the bigger name, but Jason Clarke is the lead and is in it more and stuff like that. So they have that equal billing. And like they're both executive producers, they flipped it for listing those credits. So the fact that now in season 4 and season 5, it will list Winona Ryder, David Harbour, Millie Bobby Brown, and then Finn Wolfhard under, that might not seem like a big deal, but that is a big deal. And obviously that would also indicate she is making a lot more money than the other kids, as usually the order of things is tied to money as well. They do also use the credits sometimes in little trick ways, and this is just more like information, but if you don't want to know any Buffy or Scream spoilers, jump to the timestamp on the screen. But Amber Benson was famously added to the Buffy credits after 3 seasons of being a guest star. She was added in the same episode that she was killed. So I would love to see the contract for that. And there was also that done because Joss Whedon actually wanted to do that in the pilot episode of Buffy, but they wouldn't pay for like 2 credits to be made, and it was too complicated with like people's contracts and everything like that. Eric Bane played a character that Joss Whedon was killing off in the first episode. They wanted to put him in the credits, but it was just going to be too complicated and cost too much money, so they didn't do it. So he did it in season 6 with Amber Benson's character. There's also the famous example of Scream. Drew Barrymore was in like all of the promo material. I mean, it's her bloody face on the poster. And then when they had the figures in the front, like she was the most prominent in the front of the poster. And then this is how they get out of doing the credits a lot of the time. They'll list them alphabetically, but every other star is listed alphabetically, and then she is Drew Barrymore. And in 96, when this is coming out, everyone's like, oh, you know, Drew Barrymore is going to be like one of the main people. And she originally was supposed to be the lead in Scream, but she had a scheduling conflict. And so they killed her off in the first scene. And that was hugely, hugely shocking at the time because of how she was so prominent in the materials and such a big star and listed like right on the poster and stuff. So I explain all of that stuff to say how big of a deal some minor name flipping can be. I really can't think of another example where in the 4th season of a show, one star's name was put over the others when no one has left the show and it's the same people. So she must have good agents, as it's pretty crazy, especially for someone so young. But Stranger Things is kind of an unprecedented show. There isn't really another show like that was so popular and the kids grew up on it. I mean, I think the closest comparison is probably like the Harry Potter movies, where it's the same kids over a 10-year period. This isn't quite on par with what happened with Batman and Robin in the 80s, where despite playing Batman, George Clooney didn't even get alone top billing. Arnold Schwarzenegger had top billing, and there's tons of other crazy examples. And on top of everything I mentioned, there was also the behavior that I've briefly mentioned at the premiere. Of course, for this video, I watch like everything. I pull a ton of B-roll and read everything possible and speak to people, and I went through like all the videos of the past premieres and all of that stuff, and the situation at the season 5 premiere was so different from anything they've done before, especially with Millie Bobby Brown and David Harbour. The way they did the carpet, the interviews together, and the mass focus on them, it was very different from previous years. There wasn't even a picture of David Harbour with Winona Ryder. Maybe there's something going on there, but there was people on Twitter photoshopping a picture of them together because they didn't even interact at the premiere. It was very different from the previous years, which were all very similar. Honestly, I'm sure more information will come out about this. I guess not until the entire season is out, but you never know depending how much Lily Allen or people around her knew about the situation, and I wouldn't be surprised if it comes out other ways down the line. As I said in the beginning, I was going to do this video as the next video to coincide with the release of season 5 part 1 on November 26th. Part 2 is out Christmas and the finale's out New Year's Eve, but with everything going on, I thought better to cover it a bit earlier. And I am actually going to pull a bit of a Stranger Things here and say this is the end of part 1. As long as this video doesn't bomb, I will make a part 2 because there's a lot more to talk about with the other cast members. So let me know if you want a part 2. If you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. Leave MVP below so I can thank you. I do have some new merch out that I'll wear in my next video, but I couldn't pass up wearing my Stranger Things merch for this one. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing, but no pressure. Thank you for being here. I do have a ton of other videos on, especially behind the scenes of TV shows and pop culture in general. I've left my Patreon merch, G's social media, my social media, all linked down below along with the sources. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, make sure to stay safe, take care of yourselves, and G and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye guys!